This one's not for the faint of heart. First, you are going to hear from Colonel Orndorff, a retired government contracting officer. He's a retired colonel, and he spent 30 years putting companies on contracts, and he's done it all. And he's going to give you some understanding about how the government reviews proposals that you've never heard before. It's going to reshape the way that you think about how you write a proposal, how you interact with a government office. After that, we're going right into a live session I did demonstrating tools on the tools that I use for government contracting and for business development and for federal research. After that, we have a special guest. I'm not going to name names, but she's been in the government contracting space for a long time, and she has amazing stories to tell, some great insight that will surely change or maybe completely restructure the way that you're selling to the government and you're thinking about business. And then finally, we're going to end it again with Colonel Orndorff with part of a coaching call from our GovClose certification program, which you can check out at GovClose.com. All right, let's go.
There's a couple of things that I would say from a contracting officer's proposal. I want to debunk a couple of myths right off the bat. Win themes mean absolutely nothing to the government. They're not catching them. It doesn't matter if you put them in their face. It doesn't really do anything to, ultimately influence it. It helps with the readability. That's really on your side. That kind of helps you focus. So there's some goodness to it. But once you throw it over the fence to the government, your win themes really, I don't think I ever once said, oh, here's a proposal. This is the clear win theme for this company, and it has influenced me. So there's number one. Number two, if you're developing a proposal, there's a whole bunch of conversation about, well, I want the government to think this, and let's put it in the executive summary, and, then we'll shape the thinking. It really doesn't. Most of the sub teams and the proposal evaluation don't read the executive summary. They only read their section. And when they talk about everything needs to be standalone, it needs to be standalone. What we would often do is, let me kind of use the graphic of old school when you had to provide the binder and the binder was tabbed out in 5 different sections. What I would do is, old school, I remember one of my first jobs as a lieutenant was I had to rip apart all those binders and make new binders so that the technical team for evaluation factor number 1 had each one of the sections from each one of the binders for evaluation factor number 1. They didn't see anything else. They didn't see the executive summary. They didn't see the rest of the documentation that was provided. They didn't see the CPARs. They didn't see past performance. They didn't see anything. They only saw that one section that we ripped out. So a lot of times a contracting officer, the team, the evaluation team will say, look, you've got 10 proposals. Your job, and Fred, I'm going to pick on you just because you're at the top right corner of my screen. Your job, Fred, is to give me a coordinated evaluation of those 10 for section 1, whatever that might be, or evaluation criteria, technical 1.1. And I don't care what else you do. I don't need you to do anything else. So if you're Fred and you say, oh, I've got 10 rocks to crush, I don't really care about anything else. I'm just going to do the piece in front of me because it becomes overwhelming. And oh, by the way, I've got a deadline. And oh, by the way, they're not letting me out of the building, or they're not letting me do anything else until I get this done. So you're not going to take any time to go and cross look into anything else. So as you're writing proposals, you really want to do a couple of key things for the government. And this is what I thought was brilliant. You basically have to assume that everybody's reading a ton, and they have the attention span of a gnat. So I always talk, you've heard the word, the bottom line up front, bluff. If you really want to really get, impactful proposals, what I loved, and I can't speak to, there's no rule about this, but what I really liked was for each section, if there was one synopsis summary, right up front, it said, hey, we're going to do this and this. We're going to crush it because of this and this. All the details follow. So at this point, you've already convinced me of what you want me to take away. And then everything else just reinforces that and gives me some material to make my comments that, hey, this is how they're going to approach it. There were times when I would lift, copy and paste, narrative right out of a proposal because it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed as an evaluator. But the key on this one is, if you make me search, if you're going to say, no, you got to read everything, so I want you to really understand, you have a risk of losing your audience. So each section, technical, and if you look at the range of the things you're trying to influence, the pieces that are specifically evaluated, this is where you really want to be careful with this. The contract responsibility determination is really kind of cut and dry. Don't spend too much time there. Just answer their questions. Provide the reps and certs, provide the certifications of, whatever that is, based on whatever the demand signal from the contracting team. The technical narrative, if you are being evaluated and, the technical is the most important or is a significant portion of this is where you really want to make sure you make it easy for the evaluators and the people who are defending their evaluation. So put something really clear up front. One of my favorite quotes is Lincoln said, "I wrote a 2-page letter because I didn't have time to write a 1-page letter." And it's true. If you really want to craft something down to be succinct and very impactful, and you can use AI, drop in your technical evaluation, say generate a one sentence summary or two, simple paragraph summary in 4th grade English of this, body of work. And then, and then look at it. Don't just drop that into your, make sure it actually very nicely covers that. So I'd say that's a really important piece for technical. When it gets into everything else, let me kind of step, whatever level that you're generating a proposal, whether it is a response to an RFQ, which is a quote, you're just throwing numbers down. There's nothing else. Or it's extremely complicated all the way into major weapon systems. The key is, and I would guarantee that every contracting officer is going to tell you the same thing. Read the question, answer the question. So when I review proposals for people and they say, okay, because I don't like to write because I don't know your business. I don't understand what, people do. So when I read a proposal for, like a red team, review, honestly, it comes down to very simple. I read the question and make sure you answer the question. And so as a contract officer, one of the things that frustrated me the most is I'd get a proposal and I knew the company was, world class, one of the big fives or something like that, and I'd be looking for a simple thing, describe how you're going to staff this effort. Okay. Answer the question. Don't make me go in and try to extrapolate your approach to something because, I can't do it. I mean, I know what I think it should be, or have a baseline for what I'm looking for. But at the end of the day, I cannot emphasize enough that, the biggest fails I've ever seen was, and this company is the right one. They might be the incumbent and they're crushing it, but they just didn't answer the question. So I cannot give them a rating that I know that they honestly deserve. And every once in a while, as a contracting officer, I might find some opportunity to go and open negotiations so I can say, hey, did you want to actually answer the question here so I can evaluate it honestly and give you, what the level that is, where you're competing at. I think if you have only one takeaway, it's read the question, answer the question. And I don't know how to emphasize that more. I'll probably repeat it a dozen times, but it's just because that is the number one thing. So let me put a little bit of a spin on this, and then I'll open it up to questions because Rick said that, really the key here is to give you guys a chance to ask questions. As a contracting officer, that is the single person who is responsible for adhering to federal law, the person who's answerable to the chain all the way up to Congress. So a contracting officer's authority doesn't come from anywhere inside the government except for Congress. It's directly from Congress. So if I'm a contracting officer and my commander comes in and says, hey, you need to do this XYZ, I want you to go this way or that way, the answer is, no. I can say no to anybody in the entire chain of command, all the way up to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And anybody who gets in the way of that and directs contracting officers to make a decision actually puts themselves in great jeopardy. And there's a lot of examples of that throughout history where people have overstepped that boundary and gotten in a lot of trouble. The contracting officer is responsible because that authority comes directly from Congress. It doesn't go through the 4-star. It doesn't go through, anybody in the chain of command. So to be clear about that, when the contracting officer releases an RFP, they have effectively gone through the entire thing and said, okay, we have a clear method of stating what the requirement is for the proposal, and then evaluating what is provided to us so that we have a clear, and we've told everybody, and here's the method that we will use to select the winner. This is great because technically the government has to throw the playbook on the table for you. They have to tell you exactly how things are going to work. And protests come along when the government doesn't do what the government said it was going to do. That's ultimately the fairness factor. The way the federal space works is I tell you exactly what I'm looking for. I tell you exactly what format I want you to give it to me in. I tell you what I'm going to do to evaluate it. And I tell you exactly how I'm going to select the winner on this. So you've all seen hopefully some different RFPs. And again, I'm talking kind of like in that, let's just say the 10 million range, nothing too extravagant, but it requires a level of effort that's, multiple volumes. Even if it's the very low end of just a simple response to a very complicated response, the same thing applies. The government has to be transparent. So the thing that you got to remember from a contract officer's perspective is no contract officer can do all that on their own. They rely on teams, and they have limited experience. You have only a few contracting officers out there that could probably do this entire thing from scratch without and get it sequenced beautifully. A lot of contracting officers are copying pieces from previous acquisitions, or they'll go into a system like there's a couple of Conwright was one of the contract writing systems, and there's a bunch of them now, but ultimately they're designed to generate the RFP. Well, very few people really can read an RFP from page 1 all the way to the end and all the attachments and actually have a picture of what that clear requirement is and the clear process and everything I just laid out. Contracting officers are supposed to do that, but it's a heavy lift and they're human. So a lot of times you'll see RFPs that come out and it's just a mess. There's a bunch of clauses in there that don't even make sense for what you're doing, or there's a bunch of conflicting, requirement in section L and, evaluation factors in section M, or the PWS or the statement of work it's got its own, this doesn't even make sense, or their type of contract, they want a fixed price, but they want all the cost elements to go along with it. They want to know, 10,000 details about how many hours and minutes you're going to work and who's going to do what, but they don't want to give you, the cost structure with that. There's a lot of things that can be just messy. So an RFP will go out and it's going to have problems. So when you look at that RFP, it's important for you to say, okay, there's a bunch of stuff here. I see that it's a mess. We get it. We're just going to respond to this. It's not going to be a huge impact. But every once in a while, you look at something and say, if I do this and this conflict is there, it can be disastrous for our ability to win, or if we do win. And that's when you want to use the questions and the interchange with government to make sure that everything's okay. And just a key note, the question and answer period ends if you identify a material defect in the whole overall structure. There is nothing that stops you from reaching out to the contract officer and say, hey, this isn't a question, but this is something that we're highlighting because I don't know, maybe you don't realize that you've got a train wreck built into your solicitation, and either we don't understand it or, you missed it. And it's okay. It's, it's like, help the contracting officer out. It doesn't necessarily mean you get an advantage. What it does mean is that you paint yourself as a responsive, good partner, and that does influence the team, in a way that you can't measure and nobody can actually put on paper, but it matters. So your questions matter at that point. So the RFP is put together. The government has to be transparent. From your perspective, here it is again. Look at that RFP, no matter how small or large or messy or clean it is. Read the question, answer the question. Section L is your guidebook where the contracting officer has tried really hard to say, give me exactly this, and you'll be on target. And then we'll evaluate it this way and choose the award this way. But sometimes it doesn't make question, or it doesn't make sense, and that doesn't matter. Just answer the question. There may be factors that the government needs to evaluate because of elements you may or may not know about, especially if you're trying to break into a new area. So I've talked for about 20 minutes. What I'd like to do is take a break and just see if anybody has specific questions. I think our bounded topic is about proposal writing, and I'll lean it into, what's going on in the government's mind when they're doing evaluation, if you want some questions on that. But pause there. Anybody have a question?
Sir, question.
Shoot, Ivan.
Yeah. So thanks for stopping by and helping us out here today. By the way, I do want to know if you can give us a good example of a successful proposal, if that's a possibility. If not, I get it.
Give us a good example of what kind of proposal?
Of a successful proposal that you got in.
A successful proposal. Oh, that's a great question. Read the question, answer the question. That's a successful proposal. I have one very specific, I won't give you the details around it, but it was probably $10 million overseas support for a combatant commander mission. We received 8 proposals, and there were 2 really boiled to the top. One was a major defense contractor, so they just have a professional, team, so everything was pretty smooth. But the one that really sticks out in my mind that I always think about is one that was the winner in this case. And what they did was they took the time to package everything and in a very clean way. They didn't jam everything together. They didn't try to take and fill every bit of white space. They gave the evaluator room to breathe as we were reading through it. And I was an evaluator in this situation. We had another contracting officer who was running it. And they did a beautiful job of plain language right up front. And then they would make that statement, here's what we're going to do. And then they would back it up. They would then, prove to me that's how they were going to do what they said. And this is the one I mentioned earlier, where sometimes I would just copy and paste the narrative out of the proposal if it's really nicely done. And that's exactly what I did here. Is a couple of places I would say, oh, I like this particular, I gave them maximum technical, rating in this particular area because their approach is this, they proved it, and, they have a reasonable and believable, piece there. And then what they did was, that's on the technical side. They, even on the past performance, their narrative was clean and straight to the point. It was easy to read. And, Ivan, I think the bottom line on this one is read the question, answer the question. And the best proposals that I've seen, the ones that I kind of hold in my mind as if I had to do one, I'd like to do it like that, is the ones that are just easy to read. If you're making the government dig and, try to, compile a complex, narrative, it's just hard, so a good example is just a proposal that was well organized, easy to follow, nice narrative up front, then supported, and then each section was just clean like that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'd say that's probably a good example. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, a little bit to follow up on that. And thanks for your time today, Louis. So essentially you're writing. So a lot of the things that I deal with is more on tools. And so if we are selling a hammer to the government, say DOD, there's a specification that they're looking for on steel and maybe hardness and things of that nature. So in a summary, to line out that technical specification section, that's going to be handed to, say, an engineering or technical spec person who's going to read that through. And instead of basically giving them the specification and saying, hey, you got to read through this like it's directions on the back of epoxy, you want a forward or an introduction to that section in detail. And then Is that kind of what you're referring to I mean, I'm just trying to break it down to really layman terms.
So I had a situation where, let me answer your question very directly.
Okay.
Your first line should be, our product meets or exceeds all required specification, period. And then what follows is the proof. So you make a statement right up front that you meet or exceed all required specifications of, and that will be hardness, dimensions, materials, whatever those specifications may be. And for each item, I would imagine, I imagine that you have more than just a hammer. You probably have a long list of items. For each one of those items, you want to repeat the statement. And the reason is, for all you know, they're going to send all of subset items to one person for evaluation and all of subset items to another person. So each one of those needs to be standalone. And then, whatever you need to do to prove that you meet those specifications. But I would start with that statement. We meet or exceed all specifications. And it's super simple to just throw that in there. Does that answer your question, Fred?
It does. Yeah, it does.
Okay. All right, good.
Lewis had a question, and maybe elementary because I'm somewhat new in this, but at what point in this process could there be an opportunity for a phone call to discuss in greater detail?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one. Everybody wants to influence to their advantage. And so in the cycle of an acquisition, and Ethan, this is actually a really important question because this is an area where you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. The requiring activity, the program manager or the technical requiring person, up to a certain point, has free range to go out and talk to you and work a deal and talk about what can you do, what does it look like. It's all under the guise of market research. So under market research, the communication is free flow. You can go and visit, you can do office calls, you can do phone calls, and you can, it's fair game. And then the government under market research, under Part 10, the government will go out and even issue a request for information, or we have a draft solicitation that we're asking for comments on. There's a point where once the contracting officer takes over and it becomes an acquisition, it becomes there's an RFI, which is, you're still free. But once you have a draft RFP, your lane's kind of like a shift. And once you have a formal RFP, it becomes a hard line. So once a formal RFP comes out, you as contractors, prospective bidders, the only person that it's appropriate for you to talk to is the contracting officer, or possibly the contracting officer's administrative, personnel. It is inappropriate for you to call the requiring, program manager, or the colonel, or, whoever is the bronet that you've, got in on at that point. A lot of people still do it. A lot of people still like pick up and say, well, let me call Bob and, see if we can sort this. We don't like this. Bob's going to come into the contracting officer, and you have immediately spotlighted yourself. And as a matter of fact, the worst case scenario danger of this one is ethics violations, which will get you debarred from doing government work for a while. Personally, and as a company, you do not want to try to influence anything other than the contracting officer once the RFP is released. So let's kind of like talk that one forward. A phone call is appropriate for, any time you want to talk to the contracting officer. So if you want to ask a question that could possibly benefit the entire team, then the contracting officer is going to want you to do that in an open forum in a way that they can respond to everybody, like through the questions and answers process. But if you have a specific question that you say, hey, I just need some guidance on this, not like how we're going to technically approach this or how we're going to price it or, how to be, any advantage, but you just say, it could be something as simple as, we're not sure we understand what you're asking for with the subcontracting language in the RFP. Can you either give us some guidance on what you are looking, not necessarily what you're looking for. You got to be careful because contracting officer is going to get really evasive because if there's any indication of favoritism, then you've put everybody in a bad spot. So my advice to you is don't call the contracting officer and ask questions that puts everybody in a bad spot. Use the questions and answers process. They're all trained to say, I can't answer that. You're going to have to figure it out. We'll evaluate your proposal and, see how you do. But depending on the question, it's always appropriate to pick up the phone and call the contracting officer. There's a line in the sand when it's not appropriate to call the program side or anybody else in the government. You're supposed to be effectively sequestered in the effort, and, collusion, which is, kind of coordinating with somebody else. Hey, we'll do a high bid. You do a low bid on this one, and then we'll switch next time. Don't ever get caught doing that. Don't do it. But, certainly that's a separate note. So Ethan, I don't know if I answered your question. I would add more. I'll add one more piece to this one. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call the contracting officer. And, if you're not certain, then let them tell you, hey, this is probably out of bounds. But if you're kind of new to the scene, if you're kind of new in the process, just say it. Be honest. I mean, hey, look, I don't understand how this works. Can you explain to me at least how this works? And if they say, no, we can't, good luck. Okay, fine. At least, so as long, it's a fine line. Don't put them in a bad spot, but at the same time, they are your conduit to the acquisition. The contracting officer is and then often it's impossible to get a hold of the contract officer. You can send emails, knock on their door, phone call them every day, 10,000 voicemails, they don't answer. That's a different conversation, but it's an important one. And especially if you're kind of new to the process, the contracting officer actually has a responsibility to kind of help guide you through it successfully in a way that nobody violates any ethics. So it is always appropriate to at least call and say, hey, I'm trying to figure this piece out. Don't ask them, how do I win? If I do this competitive thing, am I going to win? Nah, just be careful. Does that answer your question, Ethan?
It does. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So Louis, just going back to kind of where contracting officers break up the information to specific technical advisors or people who are looking at technical, financial, and maybe even
responsibility determinations.
Yes.
Past performance.
Yeah. So they're essentially breaking that up, sending it to those folks for evaluation. It's coming back. Typically, what's the volume of a contract officer in a day that's breaking those things up and essentially giving you 15 minutes of fame, if you will, in that time frame, and then they're moving on to another project? And then how much information are they getting back from those specific teams? But it's more of a general question.
Yeah.
If you understand it.
Well, there's a whole bunch of factors. One, assuming that it's big enough that you have to break it up. Two, with today's remote work, some of the rules are a little bit different than they used to be. I will tell you that contracting officers are often way overtasked for what they have to do. And what I always found as a contracting officer is I would toss the technical over to the technical team and they'd come back with crap. And I'm like, I can't use this. You didn't even evaluate this against your own criteria, technical team, which you developed. So there's a lot of back and forth. And sometimes you'll see something where I say, okay, proposals are due on July 1st, and you don't hear from the government for 3 or 4 months. The government schedule was 1 month, which they won't release to you because they know that there's other factors that will always pop up. But a lot of times the contracting officer will take a look at the inputs and have to kick it back to the various teams because they just didn't adhere to the criteria that were published. Now, you're talking about the timing of it. The last time I did managed a source selection, I was also doing a lot of other things, but I had a schedule that I was trying to meet. So I would break down, I would actually focus on it for whatever period of time that event was put in place, either a day, an hour, day, a week, whatever. So everything is depends, how big, what's the scope of it, where are your resources that are doing the evaluation. But 90% of it is The contracting officer has to focus on, did they do exactly what we said we were going to do? Is the evaluation, now here's another piece that in spite of the contracting officer's best effort, the contracting officer will put together the entire evaluation and recommendation for award and the basis for that. Now, depending on the size of the contract, that has to go up levels. And when I was competition advocate at various locations, I had to review that contracting officer's, final determination to make sure exactly that. Here's what they said they were going to do. Here's what they did. Here's the award they want to make. Did they follow exactly what they told everybody that they were going to do? And a lot of times they didn't. The contracting officers, allowed the teams to say, well, we like this for these factors and other, X, Y, Z. But the fact is, those factors were not part of the evaluation criteria. So I would kick it back and say, you have to throw those factors out because they're not relevant factors for the basis of award based on what you told everybody. So the contracting officer will do their piece, and then depending on the dollar amount, it'll go up levels. And if they're very large, they go up all the way to the Pentagon levels and beyond. There's a lot of people who are looking at the details of how that ultimately plays out. And Fred, I don't know if I'm answering your question or if I'm in the ballpark, but ultimately,
Yeah, you are.
yeah, it depends on a lot of things. If it's small, medium, large, if it's small, like I would have a tech team say, hey, you got 3 bids. This one's the low bid and technically acceptable, meets all the tech specs. It's, it's more on the hardware or tangible side. I didn't give it another thought. That was cranked out and off my desk. And, then we just track delivery and payment. For some of those things, the faster if I could safely and legally say, okay, that's good enough, I'm done. I would spend 2 seconds. But if there was any question about it, obviously based on the scale, scope, and effort, you get more time. So, all right.
Yeah.
What other questions? We've got about,
How you doing, Mr. Lewis?
hey, good morning. I'm on the West Coast. That's why I say good morning. It's still morning time, my time. Go ahead. What's your question? I think you're off mute. Yeah, I hear you. I did. Okay. While he's sorting his technical challenge, anybody else have any questions? So Deb's camera came on. Do you have a question, Deb? Okay. So we've got about 5 minutes left. If nobody has any questions, what I'll do is, I can't emphasize enough. I told you you're going to hear it over and over again. Read the question, answer the question. If you can keep it simple, just remember, the people that are evaluating your proposals don't want to do it. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be reading it. Make it easy, set them up for success. And, more complicated and more detailed, doesn't necessarily mean that your proposals are better received. I think, you just want to spend some time thinking about, if I had to read this on the other side, along with a whole bunch of other ones just like it, am I making this easy for the receiver? So don't get cute. Don't get clever. Because I hear a lot of times people who are writing proposals say, well, we're going to put this in there so the government's going to think this and, go this way. No, it doesn't work that way. They're not that sophisticated. They're not trying to be, they're just going, here's the question, show us your staffing plan. Is there a staffing plan? Check. Does the staffing plan make sense? Yes. That's it. They're not going to be able to determine that your staffing plan, has more to it than that.
So Lewis,
He got his tech working. Let's let him ask a question, and I have a short one. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. I'm not quite sure how to say your name. It's Jmuy Manja Muyanya. Go ahead. You're up.
Okay, he's muted again, but I do artificial intelligence. I'm a data scientist, and I do know on some of the proposals I've done, they actually reference academic articles. And so I've done the research and basically like, oh, we want data-centric, AI, for this project. So is that the right way to approach it? Basically use the reference academic articles and then study those and return it, or no?
No, your evaluators, you're going to have a rare situation where your evaluators actually go read all the reference material that they're supposed to be evaluating you against. So, keep it simple. Just say, hey, in this article, the key factor is X. we meet X and then some. So give them, make it easy for them, because we'd have all these, like in the Air Force and the DoD and the Army, they love to have a stack of reference documents, and I guarantee that most of the evaluators have not read any, if even some of that reference material. Now they might go and dig into it a little bit if needed, but so it's, again, make it easy for the evaluator. Give them a quick synopsis of what's relevant in there that they're evaluated against. And oh, by the way, sometimes, they may have read it and they may not have taken out that, important factor. And this has a chance where you, again, help them be successful. Because then their evaluation write-up is going to say, hey, the important factor in this, criteria is X, which you gave them. And this company meets it very well by doing Y. So, Deb, I think, again, make it easy. And then as a contracting officer, when I have a tech team come forward and say, hey, this is our evaluation, I'm like going, boom, you got it. All right. So you're tied to the evaluation criteria. You identified the benefit, the strength tied to that. And anybody can defend that. So that's really a good question.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. We have one more question. He's trying to get his question out.
Yes, Mr. Lewis, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for your service. My name is Joseph. My question is there a way COs, after giving awards, do they have a way of evaluating the kind of work, the quality of work you're doing? And do they put them in levels or hierarchies so that when the next job comes, they just look at the people who did it well? Do they have that kind of system?
Well, there's two different questions there, Joseph, and I'm going to go over. So if anybody needs to drop, that's fine. But this is actually an important question.
I think you've understood my question.
Well, let me restate it.
Okay.
The proposal that you have submitted, is there a way to evaluate that? And then is there a way to evaluate the work that you've done on contracts so that it can be compared to for future contract effort?
Yes.
Okay. So the first one is every proposal is evaluated, and the government's required to provide you with feedback on your proposal. If you win or lose, they need to give you a debrief, and it should be adequate to be able to say, here's what you could do better with your proposal in the future. My advice to everybody is demand a debrief. Sometimes the government will say, hey, they'll give you an email or something like that and call that the debrief, but you can demand or request, additional information. And there's some language in the federal acquisition regulation that discusses exactly what the contracting officer must give you as a debrief for your proposal. So there's the first side. Once you win a contract and you are performing extremely well, right, Joseph, you're gonna perform extremely well.
Yeah.
There's a whole process of past performance and contractor performance assessment and some other elements of when you look at past performance that the government can make awards in some cases, with past performance being the main factor. So when you get a contract, it's really important that you generate that reputation that you did the job very well based on whatever criteria. So that contracting officer may receive a questionnaire from another contracting officer saying, hey, how did they do? Did they do the contract? Did they do everything they were supposed to do? Were they responsive? Were they financially, on target? And so contracting officer to contracting officer, there's going to be a whole conversation going on in the background that says, give me some input on this. There's also an entire system for certain types of contracts called contractor performance assessment reports. And it is, get a CPARS. You might have heard the term CPARS. You'll get a CPARS and it stays in the system. Satisfactory to very good to, I think it's exceptional are the ratings. And I always have to look at those because when you do all the different proposal evaluation, we use a bunch of different factors. So I forget which ones are tied to CPARS. And very good is a minimum that you as a company should shoot for, and you should fight for it. I mean, this is one of those where you do not really want a bunch of satisfactory CPARs. You certainly don't want some that are unsatisfactory, but try to get that as high as you possibly can. because in some cases, the government can award a contract based on outstanding or exceptional CPARs, and very little else. So your reputation in performance is tracked and is a factor every agency, DoD has a certain way of doing it. Other federal agencies have different ways of doing it, but the federal acquisition requires that past performance is an element of consideration for award. So if you have bad past performance, then that can eliminate you from award all by itself, even if everything else is excellent or low price, technically outstanding. So Joseph, you've asked a complex question in two parts.
Thank you.
But it's important.
Yes.
So kind of a way, Lewis, it's like a credit rating.
Oh yeah, that's a great way to put it. Don't let it fall.
So you want to be 750 to 800 above, right?
Yeah, you want it up there. It's a really good analogy there, Fred. I can't tell you. I have one company, recent case where they received a less than ideal rating on their CPARs, and they went all in on getting that fixed. And we were able to adjust their rating, to a more appropriate level. They didn't like it at the end. They did some things where, they couldn't, they had to own some stuff, but we got a more appropriate level, and it was worth the fight because it will impact their future business. So yeah, you want to protect your credit rating, and your reputation rating, Joseph, is very important. So yeah, I think I could go on and on about that, but that's actually a good one.
Thank you.
We are at the 45-minute mark. I believe that's what Rick said, we wanted me to support. But if anybody else has any, follow-on questions or specifics, reach out to Rick, and, I'm certainly happy to, engage some more. But just a quick poll. Has this been useful? And anybody thumbs up? Okay, good. All right, excellent. Well, let Rick know, because I told him I like doing this kind of stuff, and hopefully he'll put me on the seat again. I've got 10,000 more stories, I call them acquisition adventure stories, which you don't ever want to talk about at a party because it puts everybody to sleep. Talk about pushing, but other people, every once in a while you find people who want to hear the acquisition adventure stories. So, we'll see how that goes. Okay, well, I will wrap it up at that point and give Rick some feedback, and we'll see if we see you down the road.
Thank you for your time, Lewis.
Thanks, Lewis. Guys, everybody can we get your email real quick before you leave, sir? That's okay.
My email is lewis@orndorfconsulting.com, but you can get to me through Rick. Rick's my front man. So he and I work together. I'm one of the associates, Rick Howard and Associates. So
awesome, sir. Thank you.
Okay, you guys have a great day.
You too.
Have a good one.
Rick here, looking at a few of the tools that I use for government contracting. So you can ask questions. I will answer the questions as I can get to them going through here. Some of the things I wanted to talk about were how important it is to establish a niche. And then what do you do from there? How do you go and find the leads? How do you even decide if a niche is good in government contracting, right? So how do we take advantage of all the data that's public on government contracting? Because that's the big advantage, remember. Selling to the government, there's tons of money there. It's hard. It takes a long time, but we can see exactly who buys what you sell. We can look at how much competition there is, which is amazing, right? How many proposals are coming in per solicitation? You can see that with the government. That's one of the powers of being able to develop a niche, is we can see how competitive things are. And depending on what kind of company you have, depending on what your service is, you might just have to make a small switch and have extremely extremely not competitive, or depending on your view of the word. But I want to see few solicitations or few proposals coming in per solicitation, a lot of money being spent. And then I'll walk through how I find each opportunity, go through the different tools. So where do you want to start here? I'm going to start with USA Spending, because you guys know how much I love to use USA Spending. So let's see here. So right now, what you guys are looking at is USAspending.gov. Tons of great information here. We can look up different industries, government spending, we could probably do a 5-hour live stream on how to use USA Spending to your advantage as a business owner. But what I'm looking at here is a specific niche. Okay. Now, where I might start is, so this is something simple, dry cleaning and laundry. All right. Now, we're working with a lot of technical companies, software companies, but you could have any business and sell to the government almost, because the government buys just about everything that you can think of, right? Remember, the U.S. government's the single biggest purchaser of goods and services on earth. I'm a former government procurement officer, so I'm pretty aware of all the different things they buy, from training and education to tech to airplanes that drop bombs to paying for school teachers, landscaping for fields, right? So just about anything you can think of. And there's a lot of codes in here. So what I usually do, I start at the top. I usually choose the past 4 years of fiscal spending. And then I just came down and dropped in the dry cleaning and laundry services code. You can just type in whatever it is you do and see if something pops up. So if you're looking to try to figure out what code is associated with what you do or what you're selling, you can play around with it here. There are other websites you can use as well. But this is a NAICS code, North American Industry Classification Code. And as you can see here, just in dry cleaning and laundry services, how much has the U.S. government spent? Well, here's what it is going to bring up when you type this in. These here are actually individual contracts with companies. So here I can look at the different companies that are selling those services. Here, it's telling me the awarding agencies, right? So it's telling me that the Department of Defense is spending the most money. I can actually, using this, I can go down a little bit further. I can look at sub-agency. It has to think about it, but now it's telling me that the VA, followed by the Army, followed by the Navy. The reason it did this, it said DOD at the top because that's a parent agency. So DOD, that was combining the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. But now that I hit sub-agency, it's saying, okay, well, the VA actually kind of goes up to the top. And now we can see the Army, Navy, Air Force below there. And that's huge. We want to actually know the specific offices that are selling or that are making the purchases. And if I go down even further, now it'll tell me by year. Okay, so how much is the spending by year? 53 million in 22, 64.6 million in 2023. Guys, this is just on dry cleaning. The GovClose certification is generating tremendous results. So 27 years old, you've never worked in government contracting, you've never worked as a consultant, and you just closed your first deal. Is that correct?
That's fair. And I've got a couple small projects on the side as well. So definitely probably my best investment I've made all year.
It would be my second post on how a cold call landed a 9-figure government contract. My name's Gavin Tice.
So my name is Ethan Mart. When I was able to enroll into the GovClose program, it just exceeded all my expectations and really has provided a lot of valuable learnings and insights that I would not have found on my own.
I was able to get a consulting gig with a software company that currently works with the intelligence community. Hi, I'm Deb Diller-Harris.
If you want to learn how to sell to the government, if you want to learn how to start your own consulting business, if you want to learn the skills that you need to go land a 6-figure plus account executive job with big companies selling to the government, the certification program is for you. Head on over to GovClose.com, check out our certification program, talk to the team. You won't regret it. Okay, this is how much the government's spending on dry cleaning and laundry services, right? So if you do something that's a little more technical, you can imagine that goes up. I mean, if we talk about IT software, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars, not millions. 24 says 52.9 million. Now, the U.S. government works on fiscal year, not on the calendar year. So, meaning the fiscal year for the government starts October 1st, it ends at the end of September. So that's just something to know if you're not familiar with it. Also, I want to see if you guys can, I'm just typing test in the comments here because I'm using a new streaming software. Usually I just log right into YouTube or one of the other platforms. So if you guys can see that, just give me a quick, like, okay, or you suck, or whatever you want to type in there. Don't type that. Keep going down on USA Spending. I can see the location. That's kind of cool too, because Now, if you're doing something that, if you're geographically constrained or restrained, and dry cleaning might be one of those things. Well, now we can see, all right, well, what states are actually doing most of the spending? And we can see here, Texas and California are doing quite a bit of spending for these type of services. And in this case, we're talking about dry cleaning services. So what do I do with that? Well, now I'm thinking that I may have a good niche. I don't necessarily know yet. Now, we could go and take a look. I mean, look at these obligations. This is kind of ridiculous. Century Linen and Uniform, $3.1 million. If I want to know how many proposals were written for this, if they're loaded, I can find them in here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'll just clicked on the contract number. Okay. And this is going to tell me a little bit about the contract. There's a lot that we could dig into here. I don't want to bore everybody. If this was actually your niche, you would want to deep dive on this particular contract maybe. But if I go in here, I can look at acquisitions details, competition details. Now this says 8 offers were received. 8's actually not that high, right? So if you're writing a competitive bid, if you have experience, having a 1 in 8 shot at, hey, let's see, how much was awarded already? So this is a $13.5 million contract, $3.2 million awarded so far. Okay, now I happen to know a little bit more about this whole dry cleaning thing. USA Spending is a tool that is free. It's a tool that the government has out there, has all the contract data. But what we can do is we can take a look at, if I use a paid tool like this is GovCon. Now I just ran this here. Now it's going to look at all of the contracts and it's going to tell me that on average 5 offers are coming in per solicitation. So that's pretty powerful to know that 5 offers per solicitation are coming in. So it is this means that there's low competition overall. And I can break that down even further, right? I can also take a look at things like, so here's the VA. If I want to know the exact offices that I need to target, right? With a tool that you pay for like this, we can start looking. Now it's going to tell me, hey, it's under the VA, it's the Veterans Health Administration. Then it's telling me kind of at the top here is this VA Mid-South Healthcare Network. So it's telling me exactly which office is doing most of the spending. You know, with the Army, look, it's telling me Army Material Command, Army Contracting Command, and then it's going into specific offices, this Mission and Installation Contracting Command. So now I have a really strong idea of who I need to be targeting within the VA and the Army. And I did that relatively quickly, right? So we can use these certain tools to really get an idea of who we're going after, what's a good niche, but what do I do next, right? So I have found a cool niche or good niche, a low competition niche, according to my research. And what if I want to find an opportunity here? So you probably know, if you watch the channel often, is that I do not believe in going after solicitations unless I have found that solicitation early and worked it. Meaning, if a solicitation, meaning a request for a proposal or a request for quote, comes out on November 15th, I want to know that it's coming out on November 15th. And I want to know about that probably 6 months before, because that allows me to work within the market research phase. I can now, before that solicitation comes out, I can reach out to the office. I could try to set up a meeting. I could try to influence the opportunity. I can even maybe help the government write the solicitation. That's a very powerful thing to be able to do. So the way that I do that, so I'm in GovClose right now. This is my tool for managing leads and whatnot. I'm going to go to my opportunities here. What I want to find is a sources sought. Okay, so I'm going to show you an example of how I might do this. So to find an RFI or sources sought, so I want to add a new opportunity and I want to find something within this dry cleaning realm that we're working in here. So what I want to do is I want to go to SAM.gov, right? So go to SAM.gov. Okay. And what you're going to do is you're going to search for an opportunity. You're going to go in here. You're going to see where it says select domain. I'm going to the plus button. I'm going to go to contract opportunities. Now, we're looking for a sources sought, not a regular solicitation.
I want to find something before the official solicitation comes out. So that gives me the time and the legal ability to coordinate with that office, right? I want them to be able to talk to me. I want to be able to get in there, give them a presentation, tell them what I'm doing. So we just clicked on contract opportunities. So I am going to look at notice type, and you'll see right here, there's going to be a sources sought. Most people are looking for solicitations, but I'm going to look for sources sought. That's probably what you want to look for too. I've already done this. So I found one for laundry services for military treatment facilities. Okay. So what does this mean? This means that the government, again, this is not technically, you're not going to, if you respond to this, you're not going to win a contract. But eventually you could, and you're going to be more likely to if you respond to this first. Because keep in mind, anybody that is responding to a solicitation and just writing a proposal, if they have not responded to the sources sought that came before it, then they are going to be less likely to win. It's that simple, right? So if I put a sources sought out and I get 3 responses, and then I put the solicitation out 6 months later and I get 15 responses, but 3 of those people have been working with my office, meaning my office when I was in the government, putting companies on contract. I knew them. I got to see their past performance. Maybe they helped me, but maybe they made suggestions to help us write the solicitation. They have relationships. How much more likely are they to win than you who just engaged on the solicitation, right? I mean, it should be common sense, but it's not. And I understand that because government contracting's complicated and it is riddled with policy and regulations and contract law that you're not used to seeing, right? And most people have never even heard of a sources sought or a market research phase. So if you fall into that category, then you're that much ahead of the game now. So we're looking for sources sought. So what do you see when we're going down here? Well, it tells us it's with the Defense Health Agency. And it's probably going to have some statement in here about, hey, this is not a solicitation. It's always going to have that. Often, and let me talk about why the government puts these out. The government puts these out for a few reasons. They may be trying to figure out if they can set this aside for a certain type of business, a small business, a woman-owned small business, an 8A. You name the set aside, a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. How does the government figure out if they're going to restrict competition? Well, this is one of the ways they figure it out. They put out a sources sought and they will ask, hey, what kind of business are you? Are you going to respond to the solicitation when it comes out? And if they get a certain number of one of those, I guess you could say, set aside type businesses, well, then they may determine to set it aside. What if you don't have a set aside? What if you're a small business, but not woman owned, not a veteran or service disabled? Well, then you can suggest to the office, say, hey, look, we recommend that you just make this a small business solicitation when it comes out. Okay. Because you don't want them to restrict it so you can't put in a bid. Right. On the other hand, if you are a woman-owned small business and you suggest that they restrict it to woman-owned small business, and they do, so a couple months from now when the solicitation comes out, if it's restricted for woman-owned small business, that means you've just eliminated all the competition that's not a woman-owned small business. So think about how much more effective you are at winning that contract. You just eliminated all that competition. Not to mention the fact that you may have gotten in there early, set up a meeting. So if I keep going here, there are going to be questions that they want you to answer. They're going to give us some information. So they're telling us a little bit about the facilities, the tools, what do they want you to do, your dry cleaning and laundry services in this case. Now, and they will also ask you to make a submission. They're going to tell you what they want you to submit. Here it says, interested parties may express, that didn't look good. Interested parties may express interest and provide a capability statement, products list, no later than Monday, 25 November. What else is it saying here? Non-proprietary information. Okay, so if you don't know what a capability statement is, I've done videos on that. You can check it out on our YouTube channel. But are you confined to only submitting a capability statement, which is it's a one-page marketing document, basically. So the answer is no. So the beauty of this is that the government doesn't put one of these out unless they have funding and a requirement lined up to put somebody on contract. This is a lot of work. So when we submit on this, we're not wasting our time. What we're doing is we're identifying an opportunity early that has money, and we're talking to the exact people that could put you on contract. So instead of chasing squirrels, instead of like going, hey, do I need a GSA schedule? What AI proposal writing tool should I get? Instead of wasting time with all that, we're going right to the source. Who has money and who buys what we sell? And that's here. How to get the certification one. Yeah, I can get into certification, how you can do those. But by the way, the certification, don't hang your hat on that certification. Your certification can help you restrict competition. There are some certifications that move the needle a little bit more than others, like 8A and service disabled veteran owned small business. But the certification is not going to equal contracts just rolling in. It can help you slightly. If you have a good business, a good product or solution that you provide, there's no reason that you can't go in there with a little persistence, determination, and a plan and win these contracts. Okay. So with this, they say, hey, we want a capability statement. What I'm telling you is that this is not a official solicitation. If this was a request for proposal, I would tell you to do exactly what the instructions say, because you could be eliminated from the competition. If they ask for 10-page proposal and you write a 15-page, at best, they're going to cut off the last 5 pages and only read the first 10. If they ask for 12-point font, put it in 12-point font. Like, they're going to score everything. But nothing's being scored here. This is your way of influencing them. So I would give them the capability statement, but I would also include a lot more. So I'm making suggestions here. If you have a GSA schedule, I'd say, hey, maybe you could use GSA as the contracting mechanism to put a company on contract with this. If they do that, you've just eliminated anyone that doesn't have GSA. If you do have a certification one, you could suggest that and eliminate competition that way. But what if you're a laundry and dry cleaning, by the way, it doesn't matter, like, you don't have to be a dry cleaning and laundry business for this to make sense for you. This could be any business in any industry. The sources sought come out for almost all of them. But if I'm a dry cleaning business, what I might do is, let's say I have a machine that's environmentally friendly and certified, or maybe I have some special training. I might recommend to the government, hey, to meet some of the environmental guidelines that have come out in recent documentation from the government, which, by the way, might disappear with the recent election or be restricted a little bit more, but we'll see. But hey, to meet some environmental codes, we recommend that you put in the solicitation that the dry cleaning business has to have this type of machine that's environmentally friendly, blah, blah, blah. Well, now what have you done? So even on the surface, it may not look like much. When that solicitation comes out, if the government writes in as a requirement that whoever does this work has to have this special machine, well, then you have just put yourself ahead of all your competitors. In fact, they might not even be able to compete if they don't have that machine. And this could apply to anything. But if you're offering program management services, well, then you could suggest, hey, we recommend that in addition to having the PMP certification, all your employees have the GovClose certification. That's just a plug for my GovClose certification program, but it could be anything, right? So you're recommending things that you have that could differentiate you and keep you competition-wise, eliminate some of the competition. So anyway, we go down. So here's what they want. We want the capability statement. Who are you sending it to? Look at this. A lot of people are asking me, how do I find leads for government contracting? I just showed you. How do we find them? We go to SAM.gov. Before we even do that, we look for a niche that's not very competitive. Who are we actually talking to? It's right here. Here are the 2 people that we have to reach out to with their email addresses. Like, that's who we're sending the capability statement to and the sources sought to, right? So, all right, what am I going to do with all of this information now, right? Because there's actually a lot to do here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own opportunity. So however you're tracking leads for your business, most people have a CRM of some sort. I'm no different. So this is the one I built just for government contracting. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert everything in here right from, I'm just going to cut and paste it. I do have a SAM scraper, but I'm not going to use that right now. Laundry services for military treatment. And I also have, like I said, the exact contact that I'm going to have to reach out to. It looks like this woman, Michelle, right? So I'm going to go in here going to put her name. Yes. I'm going to add her email address. Bear with me here because this is going to illustrate the exact steps that I'm going to take this source of SOT through once I have this in here. I'm not going to make this all exhaustive either. This is the source of SOT. I don't know how much it's worth, but let's say my average contract opportunity is 150,000. We could put that in there for now. And have her email. Okay, so I'm going to create that. Okay, so now I have my source of SOT opportunity in my pipeline. And again, that's based off of what I found on SAM.gov, which is based off of what I found in USA Spending as a low competition, high paying niche for something that I can provide. Oh, what CRM is that? You would love to know. No, this is called GovClose. This is a CRM, Kent, that I built for our certification students. Oh, let me just put it in here. I don't even think you can click on that, but GovClose.com. So if you go to GovClose.com, you'll see, but essentially when I retired from being an acquisitions officer in the Air Force, started a consulting company with our clients, Kent, they were all over the place as far as the CRM. Some of them were using a spreadsheet. Some of them are using Salesforce. Some of them were using HubSpot. Some of them used Asana. None of it made sense. And none of them were set up for government contracting. That's for sure. So I had to put something in front of them and their sales teams where they're not going to miss what was obvious to me, but not to somebody that is not in the government space all the time, right? And I'm going to address some of those with you right now. So even though you can't buy this, only my students have this right now and the companies we're working with, you could set up something very similar to this in your own CRM. So as long as it's editable, you could put similar steps in there. So this is what I would do, right? The first thing I'm going to do is I might even in my mind, you can edit these, you make a go, no go decision at some point on your opportunities. Now, this step may come early, it may come later. It just depends on the opportunity. But for this one, let's say that I have decided that I need a teaming partner to do part of the work. So I end up over here, I establish teaming partners. And for me to establish teaming partners, by the way, another thing that you can use USA Spending for, because if I go in here and just look at this source of SOT, they started talking about some of the things that it wanted us to be able to do. Talking about different linen items, dry clean, launder wash, maybe like the washing piece of this, or washing medical and dental uniforms is something that I don't do. Well, what I could then, if I wanted to find a company to team up with on that, I might start looking through here because these are all companies that have contracts for dry cleaning. And again, you can change the code and make it whatever your company is, cybersecurity, construction, software, virtual reality, anything. Because I want to see companies that not only do they have past performance, I want them to have past performance with the agency that I'm selling to. And that's very important. So here, Defense Health Agency. In fact, if I don't have experience with Defense Health Agency or any experience at all, I'm going to look for a company that does laundry services and I'm going to go reach out to them and try to team up with them on this. So that's step one. You can see each one of these steps actually has quite a few other steps associated with it. But establish teaming partners. How am I going to do that? I'm going to reach out to those companies I found on USA Spending. I'm going to send them an email. I'm going to call them. I'm going to say, hey, look, I'm a small business. I have an opportunity with Defense Health Agency. I can do part of it. I'd like to team up with you maybe on another part of it. This is actually an amazing way, not only to team up with companies, but to build these teaming partnerships with them in the future. Look, companies selling to the government, including mine, maybe even yours, if you're watching this and you're selling, they get hit up all the time. As soon as they see that you're on contract, every company in the world thinks, I'm going to just reach out to them and maybe they need some subcontracting work, right? But look, they're already on contract, right? Meaning they have their subcontractors 99 times out of 100. So it's just spam. But if you reach out to them and say, I have an opportunity for you that I found you don't even have to tell them what the opportunity is. You're just saying, I have an opportunity with Defense Health Agency. Let's set up a conversation. If they're worth their salt, they're going to want to have a conversation with you. So establish teaming partners. That's where that is. Now, even before I do that, I might just email the government POC. POC is just my garbled acronym for point of contact. So it's kind of a military thing. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to email the point of contact before I actually write my submission? Well, there's a lot of reasons I might do that. One reason I would do that is because I want to get a sense of how much competition there is. Is this potentially, do they have somebody in mind for this? If I don't know if there's an incumbent on this or not, then I might ask if there's an incumbent. But you can just email the point of contact and ask them questions. You might see, and this happens to me all the time, I might find a source of thought that I know they like, or here's a good example. It's a source of thought for training. And I know that they want to train aircrew to do X, Y, and Z. They're not asking for an augmented reality or virtual reality software. But I know that the augmented reality software that my client has can solve part of their training. So I might email the government point of contact and just ask them, hey, I know you're not asking for, but we have an augmented reality solution. We've sold it to the Air Force to do other types of training. That would actually solve a big piece of this for you. It would probably save money. Is this something that, was it worth my time writing a source of thought submission and suggesting this? And you would be surprised, like just that email, whether they say yes or no, that is so helpful to you. You might get a hell yes. And now you've got, yeah, I definitely want to fill in all the paperwork and put the source of thought together, submit this, because they might be interested in this technology that can help them out. On the other hand, they could say, no, the requirement's already set. We're not looking for that. I want to know that now before I go through all of the trouble of writing a source of thought submission. Okay, I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste their time. So just emailing the point of contact can be hugely beneficial. They may even want to meet with you right before you write the source of thought. You can get a lot of information just right here. Okay, so I've called them. It looks like something I still want to make a submission on. Now I've got to write my response. Okay, and if you have a teaming partner, that means you're going to have to coordinate between them and you, and that can be a pain in the butt if you've ever done this before. So just make sure you have enough time to do that. And I like to be in charge of this process. I don't like to leave this to somebody else. If you leave it to somebody else, assume it's not going to get done. So I write the source of thought response. There are tools out there that can help you, but look, I recommend just, if you want to use ChatGPT to help you craft some of the paragraphs and stuff, you can, but the best thing that you can do when you're writing a source of thought is read the question, answer the questions that they want answered, and make sure you provide the government past performance. If you don't have past performance with the government, you want to give them at least little snippets of use cases where you've done this work commercially, right? Like, hey, I helped company X, and give them the metrics, right? I cleaned, this is dry cleaning. So I cleaned 1,000 shirts and there were no blood stains on any of them from the Marine Corps ball or whatever. You get my point. All right. So I write it, I submit it. Now, this is one of the biggest, I'll ignore that. This is one of the biggest things that almost every company I've worked with has made this mistake. I've made this mistake. Everyone's made this mistake. When you submit the RFI, you have to confirm receipt. Why is that? If the government doesn't respond back when you submit anything, proposal, sources sought, but especially these things because these are kind of official responses. But if you don't get a response when you email the government, you have got to assume that they did not receive your email. I don't know how many, in fact, I had one woman who, like, when I asked her, did she get her proposal confirmed? She's like, no. And then what I told her to do was email them again, but do not forward the proposal or the source of sought that you sent. Remove the attachment, remove all the links from your email block, no pictures, just, hey, I wanted to confirm that you received the submission. What does that do? Well, first of all, links and photos and attachments can be blocked by government email systems. My wife's emails are blocked all the time. Usually I didn't get her emails. So I knew that this happened, and it happens with companies. You don't want to go through all of the work of putting a good product together, a source of sought, submitting it, only to know that, or learn later that the government didn't even receive it, right? So in the example I gave you, the government responded back and said, oh, we didn't even get it. Thank God you sent it to us. They might give you another email address to send it to. You might have another way of sending it in, but you got to make sure that they actually receive the submission. Okay. So This is critical. Confirm receipt. And if you can't get a response with an email, you have to call them. Just figure it out. Make sure that they receive what you're sending them. And hey, picking up the phone, be surprised how many people don't want to pick up the phone these days. You pick up the phone, that is a really good way of getting your foot in the door with a government office. All right, so what's next? Well, we're not just leaving it there, right? You've gone through some work to submit this source of SOT to the government. I want this $150,000 dry cleaning contract. Now, the whole point of this, sorry, I just brought up the bigger opportunity there. The whole point of this is I want to set up a meeting with the government office. Like, it is all about building relationships. So if you have any takeaway from all of this, how do you win government contracts? Meetings win contracts. Relationships win contracts. That's very similar to the regular sales, the B2B, B2C sales process. It just has to be done in a different way because it's a highly regulated environment, but there's still people on the other side of the desk. And those are the relationships you have to cultivate. So this is not government contracting is not now and never was you just sit in your basement and don't talk to anybody. That's not what it is. It's quite the opposite. It takes a long time. It's hard. It can be very lucrative if it's done right. Let me give you just an example of this, right? So first of all, request follow-up meeting. After they get that source of SOT and they've confirmed it, I want a meeting. I want to talk to them. I want to do a briefing with them. I want to talk to them. After I got out of the Air Force and got on the commercial side of this, one of my clients ended up hiring me to just run their sales, for their pipeline for Air Force, Space Force sales. And one of the major ways that I sold, by the way, sold millions of dollars in software services, never wrote a proposal on a solicitation because I didn't have to. I upselled the existing customers. I cultivated a relationship. So one of our clients, our government clients, he was really into smoking and he had a farm, and I have a very expensive smoker on my deck right now. Not a lot of people in Massachusetts kind of subscribe to the Southern barbecue and all of that, but this dude got me really into it. But the point is, I took interest in something one of my clients was interested in, and because their entire team was into it. So now I have something to talk to them about that's not just contracting, right? I'm developing that relationship with them, right? So, hey, yeah, I just did a Boston butt. Oh, great, Rick. What kind of pellets did you use? Blah, blah, blah. And then, oh yeah, by the way, we need 3 more licenses. See what I'm saying? So just make sure meetings win contracts. So you got to request the meeting. You don't know whether that's good or bad. Do you mean our expert? Oh, that's funny. Do you mean that's not good or bad for the relationship piece? Put it in the comments. I'd like to know what you mean by that. I think it's a good thing because, look, you have to build a relationship. You're building relationships in sales, B2B, B2C. On the government side, it has to be done in a certain way, right? Once you're on contract with the government, you got to have that relationship in place. If for no other reason, you have to make sure that whatever it is you sold them works because you have a moral and ethical obligation to make sure that you're not selling crap to the government. Whatever it is, it has to work. It has to be working for them, supporting the military, supporting the vets, whoever's using it. Make sure it works. That also gives you the opportunity to tell them what else you have to sell. Do they need more of it? Okay, so what do I do when I request that meeting? I might have to request that meeting a few times. I'm not always going to get it, but what's next here? Demo, capability brief. I want to get in there, right? And I have other videos on how to actually build a briefing for the government. If you could do a demo, it's probably easier to get a virtual demo scheduled. If you have something to demo, you could do a slide deck, but you want to be super focused, tell them a little bit about your company, but you want to learn more. Your objective you don't want to be talking the whole time. Right? Remember in sales, you want to get whoever you're selling to do the talking. Learn as much about the customer as possible. Learn what they need, learn about the opportunity. Don't go in there and give them a list of 500 things that you do. You don't do 500 things, and they don't want to hear that you do 500 things. Nobody wants to hear that you do everything. Even if you don't go in there and tell them you do everything, ask about them. What is your, I think I got kicked off my own live stream there for a second. All right, Jose, how do you bring value to companies that have a capture plan? They're doing 10 million a year in obligations. This is in regards to prospecting for clients. Do you mean prospecting? I'm assuming, Jose, you mean prospecting for government clients. Is that correct? It doesn't really matter how much you're selling each year. I mean, the more you're selling, it means the more past performance you have. First thing, Jose, I would say that you want to do is if your company, if what you're saying is your company is doing 10 million a year in contracts for the federal government, the first thing I would do with a company like that is I would have you list out every single federal customer that you have. And I would want to know, are you following up with every single person that you're selling to? So everybody's selling something different, right? Could be software, could be dry cleaning services, but the program manager, your point of contact in the government that you're working with, I would make sure that you're reaching out to them every month, every 2 months. Hey, how much is what we're selling you hitting the mark? Is there a problem? If there's a problem, you fix it. You work with, okay, I'm going to get my guys together. We're going to fix it. If there's no problem, then you can tell them about some of the other services you have, right? Oh, hey, by the way, did you know that we have these new options for our software? Do you know that we can do X, Y, and Z? So it just gives you an opportunity to meet with each of them and try to upsell them. That's what you want to do. So, and by the way, Jose, I bet like a company like that, that's where you would really make your money. Like that is for me, the number one thing to do, the number one place where there is money that companies aren't exploiting it. And the easiest way to sell to the government is upselling your existing clients. The timeline's shorter. You're already on contract. They already know you. Those are the relationships you want to build. And then after we've done that and we have a system in place for routinely reaching out to every single person that you have sold to on the government side, then we're going to start taking a look at what I just went through up here. I'm sorry, you're not looking at my screen anymore. I'm going to have to share my screen again, which is finding things like a source of sought or reviewing acquisitions forecasts, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to build a pipeline of these opportunities before the solicitation. And we're going to walk them through all of these steps. The further I get down on this line of steps, the higher the P-win goes, right? So if I've talked to the office, if I've submitted a source as sought, I requested a meeting, I was able to give the meeting. Now I'm to the point where I need to, which one? Sorry, this one here. When is the solicitation? Now I've done all of this work before the solicitation comes out, right? So here's the solicitation, step 11. Believe it or not, this is where most companies start. This is where most companies think the government contracting process starts when the RFP comes out. Hey, the solicitation came out. I don't know how many friggin' like YouTube videos I've seen where people are like, oh yeah, I'm just finding solicitations and I'm writing proposals. Like I know these people. I know a lot of those people. And what they're not telling you is they have to write 20 to 50 proposals on those solicitations to even get a bite. That is not the way to sell to the government. And by the way, a lot of the people that are doing that, they're finding a solicitation and they're writing a proposal. They get mad because it looks like the solicitation was written for their competitor and then their competitor wins. And they're like, I've written 3 proposals and I haven't won anything. And by the way, it looks like these solicitations were written for my competitor and they won. So it's all rigged. Well, it's not rigged. It's just that you didn't know there was a market research phase, which comes before this, where companies are allowed to talk to the government. So think about it. All your competitors, they're starting way back here. And they're doing all the work, the RFI, the partners, emailing the POCs in the government, writing the sources sought, submitting the sources sought, requesting a meeting, setting up meetings, helping them write the solicitation, all of this work, sometimes months and months of work, if not years for huge contracts. Then the solicitation comes out. So think about how much more likely you are to win if you've done all that work going up to the solicitation release, right? So this is how the process works for most things, not commodities, not new tech development, but just about everything else. This is what we're doing. Now, probably the same woman here that I have to send the proposal to. The real work begins with the solicitation. We're not getting artistic on the solicitation. We're writing this exactly as they want it, but we're using all the information that we learned back here. Because I can tell you, when they put the solicitation out, you're not going to have all the use cases. They couldn't possibly put all of the information in here. you're going to have, I just got off of that screen, but you're going to have way more information because you've talked to them, you've set up meetings, you've done the sources sought. You're going to be that much more prepared. Then you're going to look, and even here, you're not going to win them all, but your P-win is going to go up a lot higher. And, I have clients, 30%, 40% win rates. Now they're being very picky, right? But you're going to waste a lot less time, trust me, if you use a method like this. So you submit the proposal, and once again, you confirm that the government receives it. Because if you don't confirm they received it, then they didn't receive it. They don't send you an email saying, we received your proposal. You assume that they did not receive the proposal. And once they've confirmed, now you can just wait for the award decision. And they should tell you, hopefully you won. Great. What happens if you lose? Well, if you lose this award, you can ask them for a debrief. What was wrong? Like, did you do something wrong with the proposal? Right? There is something that probably happened there that you can improve on, because we can always improve when we're writing things. All right, let me see here. Did I answer all of the questions here? You've got, if anyone doesn't look around the pod, they're excluded. I would say, how do you bring value to come? All right, I answered that one. Then Pigeon Post wrote CCP DOS. I don't know what that means. Our expert, meaning the isms. Oh, I see what you're saying. So favoritism, nepotism, etc. versus DEI. If one doesn't look around the pod. Okay, so look, first, just a little bit about, I think, what's going to happen in government contracting post this election. Both the Biden administration and the Trump administration were doing things to make it easier for small businesses to win contracts. But they both go about it in different ways. And this is going to answer a little bit about your question. The Biden administration, the way that they were trying to even the playing field was to increase percentages of contracts awarded to, I wouldn't call it favoritism, but the set-aside groups, woman-owned small business, 8A, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, et cetera. So those type of set-asides were how the Biden administration, one of the ways that they would do that. Whereas the Trump administration, what we saw is they were using more deregulation, more simplified acquisitions, make it happen faster, get some of the bureaucracy out of the way. So first of all, our expert, I would think that we're going to see less of a focus on the isms and more of like, let's just even the playing field, make it easier for people. That's what I'm expecting. I could be wrong. Certifications, by the way, don't get caught up thinking those certifications mean more than they do. I don't know how many people have gotten an 8A certification and thought the heavens are going to open and contracts are going to just start falling into their business. And it didn't. Certifications can help you move the needle a tiny little bit. The best thing that you can do is have an amazing product or service and an amazing sales team. Doesn't matter how good your business is. If you can't sell, you don't have a business. Government contracting is even more important because it's complex. You want to have a focused plan, have people that can sell, and they've got to have a persistent, big pipeline for your business. That's what is going to move the needle. There are certain things like the VA, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, they have contract law written, so a lot of their contracts go to SDVOSB, and that's true. 8As make it easier for sole source contracts, but you're not losing contracts because you don't have a certification. Like if that's your mindset, I would ask you to change that respectfully. Which contracts offer the most meritocracy? Here's what I would say, not construction. So I mentioned when I think about certifications in meritocracy, there are only a few areas where the certification is going to eliminate you. One is if a solicitation has already been set aside for a certain type of business. And the other is just flat out, if you're selling to the VA has a preference program for service-disabled veterans, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses, that's not going to change. But it's not all industries, right? So construction is heavy. If you look at all the construction contracts awarded by the VA, a huge percentage of them go to SDVOSB. But when we get away from that, you just have to look at the agency. This is why the data is so important. You can look at each agent. In fact, I'll do it right now. Okay, so we're in USA Spending, right? And you wanted to know about meritocracy. Now, I'm just going to stick with this industry of dry cleaning, right? Because that's what I clicked on. So let's take a look here, right? 52.9 million in 2024, 64.6 million in 2023. Let's take a look at this number because there's a lag in reported spending from the government. What I'm going to do here is we're going to take a look at exactly how many businesses had certifications in these contract awards versus did not. 64.6 million. Again, this is a low spend, but it's dry cleaning, right? And we can see here the VA followed by, so if the VA, here's my suspicion. If the VA awarded $55.4 million in contracts, I would expect a strong amount of those went to service disabled veteran businesses. But now let's take a look here. I'm going to look at the recipient type. So these are all business. Let's take a look at what's the difference between niche and small business. Let's take a look. Small business. Going to run this again. Think about the data. Okay, so now what we see is, well, let's take a look here. 2023. So about half of the spending in 2023 went to small businesses. That's actually really good. The government, the SBA standards about 23% for small business contract awards, right? So this means about 50%. So this means in this particular field, this dry cleaning and laundry services, that a higher percentage of contracts are going to small businesses than is the standard, right? Now, if you want to look at something like how many of those go to woman-owned small business, I can click that. Let me get rid of that. And by the way, you could run this drill with every single certification and see exactly what's going to which certifications, if that's what you're trying to figure out. What I like to look for is how much is going to a business that looks like mine. Okay, so now let's see here. So about 13.2 million went to woman-owned small businesses, which, remember, it was about 30 million that year, right? So it's just under half of the small business contract awards went to woman-owned small business. So that tells you something. It also tells you what the Army's doing. 6 million from the Army, about 6 million from the Navy. It's pretty evenly distributed. So hopefully that helps you like figure out, it can give you the tool basically to figure out which agencies are awarding to what types of businesses. It might affect which agency you're actually going to target as far as selling to the government, right? Let's see, does GovClose help companies earn certifications? Do they prevent there's no preventing the isms. We show people, so GovClose is two things, just so you guys all know. So GovClose is half a certification program, and that's where we teach the government contracting process. And we are teaching that primarily for people that want to start their own consulting business or get a job as a sales executive with a company selling to the government. We have a module at the end that shows them exactly how to start a consulting business. And we also have students that are going in, I mean, they're crushing it. They're closing deals left and right, getting jobs with big government contracting companies. Those are big money sales jobs. The other side of our business is the business that I've had since I retired, and that's helping companies sell to the government. Now, I don't have getting the certifications I don't think that is something that you should be paying somebody for. So I don't charge people to get certifications. I think it's a very straightforward process. You go to the small SBA website, SBA.gov, I believe, and it'll walk you through the different certifications. Here's my experience is the service disabled veteran and small business certification. It takes a couple weeks to get. I got it just to go through the process. Not that hard. Woman-owned small business takes a little bit longer. 8A, big pain. HubZone, I don't know. I haven't had to get it myself. But it's self-explanatory. It walks you through all the steps. But it can be a little bit painful. If you pay someone, they're just going to go to that website and look at everything that needs to be done. And it's a ton of information, personal information, tax information from you, personal information that you probably don't want to be giving someone anyway. My recommendation, go to SBA.gov and get the certifications if you qualify for them. But the other thing our expert is to prevent the isms. Here's the thing. I don't care if a company has a certification. Like if you have when I say prevent the isms, if I have a good plan, you can go out and let's say, we'll stick with dry cleaning since we've been looking at this ad nauseum here. If you have a dry cleaning company and you have an 8A, which is like the king of the certifications. So you can get sole source contracts. And I have a dry cleaning business, but I don't have 8A. I'm not worried about your certification because I know, because I've done the research, I know what offices I am trying to sell to. I'm not selling to the ones that are doing a lot of 8A contracting. I'm going to avoid those. I'm going to go to the ones that avoid the most non-certification small business contracts. Or if I happen to be SDVOSB, then I'm going to go and target the ones that give the most SDVOSB contracts. And I'm going to win more contracts than you because I know what I'm doing. I mean, that's how we get away from the isms. Like we teach people, there's very few people actually understand how to sell to the government. So people going through our course know how to do it, and they're going to get better results than almost anybody else because they're going to do their research and know that this is a persistent over time thing that we have to do, working ahead of the solicitation with the people that buy what you sell, that buy from companies like yours. That's how we do it. And cold calling companies that you want to offer your, oh, I see what you're saying, Jose. You're talking about consulting leads who think after a couple wins, they have nothing to improve on. Jose, oh, sorry. Jose, I think I hope I didn't just delete your comment. I don't cold call companies. I certainly have cold emailed companies. Here, look, if somebody calls me with an ego, it happens very rarely. If someone calls me, they just want my help. If you do run into somebody that has an ego about their wins, then it's probably not a good fit. Like, you got to make it, if you're consulting, I would say I think most people can develop a really good sense of who a good client to work with is than another. That's why in Jose, this is what I would start. I see what I did. I guess I pinned your comment up there. I didn't even know I could do that. The first thing I start with when I'm giving a consultation is government contracting is hard. It takes a long time, but it can be very lucrative if you have a focused plan and you are persistent over time in the steps that you have to do. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated, but it does take time. 6 to 18 months is what you got to plan on, right? And in the beginning, if you don't know how many contracts you're going to close, we think of it as this: 10% close rate. If you want to make $10 million a year, I need to build a $100 million pipeline, just like I showed you guys with the CRM steps, right? So $10 million a year, I want a $100 million pipeline. I want this to be a $100 million pipeline, and assume 10% of them will close. Now, if you're following these methods, you're going to get a higher percentage, but the only way you're going to know what your real close rate is to close contracts. We eliminate opportunities that don't make sense for us to follow because we don't want to waste our time. In any company where they've won a couple of contracts, if they're talking to you as a consultant to help sell to the government, then they know that they need help. If they didn't need help, they wouldn't be talking to you because they'd just be winning contracts, right? So everybody needs help. Everybody's looking, but in different degrees. So again, if they don't want your help, don't waste your time. Let's see here. Salute third-party assessment organizations. Oh, yeah, 3PAOs. Yep. Yeah, 3PAOs. Hey, they're making a lot. It's a great position to be in right now if you're a 3PAO. 3PAO, for everybody that doesn't know, the government has a couple of ways the government has very strict cybersecurity policies in place. So especially for software companies, but not just software companies. So there's something called CMMC. It's like the cyber maturity risk model, something. I know I don't have that completely right. CMMC, the other one's FedRAMP that everyone's talking about. FedRAMP is mainly for cloud-hosted software suites, platforms, essentially, but very restrictive, very hard to meet cybersecurity policies for some companies, especially small businesses. And this is, by the way, before I get off the stage here, if anything, over the next 4 years, we may see a little bit of loosening of these restrictions. At least the Trump administration, what we saw was a loosening of a lot of the restrictions, trying to make things easier for small businesses from a policy and administrative standpoint, where we saw some very strict measures being put in place the past 4 years. But again, they weren't entirely, they were still there a little bit with the Trump. So what are we going to see over the next 4 years? Hopefully it makes it a little bit easier. If you do have a software tool, know that you're not getting on a government network without meeting their cybersecurity restriction policies, right? So I would look up CMMC, look up FedRAMP. The 3PAO, those are third-party assessors that the government has basically authorized to take a look at your company, your software suite, your computers, how you store your emails, government information, and do an assessment to see if you meet their policy. So you could do a self-assessment, and then you can then upload your score into, I think it's called SPRS. It's been a while since I've had to look at it. But yeah, they're making big bucks because companies need that in order to sell. I had a client reach out to me about 6 months ago. He's been selling to the military for years and years. He gets an email from the Navy. They want to put an $800,000 delivery order on his schedule, on his contract, but they can't do it because he didn't do the SPRS assessment. So he had to call a 3PAO. So that is the 3PAO piece. All right, last chance for questions. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, hey, it was great once again meeting with you here on the live call. For any of your questions, you can always reach out directly to me. My email is rick@govclose.com. And also would love to, if anybody's interested in our certification program, love to see you go through there. Specifically, if you're looking for a career change or you want to be more of a consultant, I'll just put it in the notes there. I think it's gonna, something's gonna pop up there. But yeah, so essentially the way the certification program works, come in, it's a mixture of on-demand classes and weekly coaching. And at the end of it, a lot of our students are going on to advise companies, work with them. A lot of sales teams are actually going through too, some company owners. So come on in. Love to see you there. Let's see here. I didn't see your question, Jose, about USA spending. Hold on a second. I saw your question about when cold calling, companies that are selling to the government. Oh, based on the data in USA Spending, how are you identifying how much companies are actually receiving in revenue? Oh, Jose, that depends on the contract, right? I mean, every single contract's going to be a little bit different. If you're selling a recurring software license and you're getting ARR, I mean, most of that's probably profit. But if you're selling services, you might get 10%. A lot of contracts is a standard. You might see 7 to 12% in profit written into the actual contract, but then the company's also on services is also making profit off the total charged for each of the people. It just depends. If it's commodities, it's wicked low. It's pretty high if you're selling consulting services to a company though, right? If it's just you, that's profit. So anyway, hope that helps. Thanks, guys, and we will see you next time. Today, I've got Michelle, founder and CEO of Cheetah Learning. Hey, Michelle, how are you today?
I'm great, Ricky. Thank you for having me on your show. And I liked our preamble. I think we have great energy here.
Yeah, no, first of all, anyone that was in the Air Force at some point in their career is always going to be a welcome guest on this show. And there's just that camaraderie that you get with someone else that served that you can't recreate. And by the way, I love your graphic there, your Cheetah Agile projects.
Yeah, my Cheetah jacket.
Oh yeah, look, everything's Cheetah.
Everything's Cheetah. Yeah, it's so funny. Everybody gives me all this Cheetah stuff. I can wear Cheetah clothes 7 days a week, head to toe. So many people have been doing this for 22 years, and so it's been great branding. But it's actually legitimate because we do everything Cheetah fast.
I love it. Well, we'll get into Cheetah here in a few minutes, but why don't we start with you? If you could maybe tell our audience a little bit about you, like where'd you grow up and how'd you end up in the Air Force and school and your businesses, all of that. We want to know it all.
All right. So I grew up in a large Catholic family in Connecticut and 6 kids. And so my parents had 6 kids in 8 years, and I was one of the middle ones. And so when I was going to be a junior in college, there was going to be 5 of us in college. So I was really good at science and math, and I looked at the Air Force opportunities, and I got a full ride Air Force ROTC scholarship to go to Syracuse.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, it was great. So I was in aerospace engineering, and it was interesting because Connecticut has a lot of aerospace, and University of Connecticut did not have an aerospace program. So I went to Syracuse. Yeah. I know it was weird. They had mechanical engineering, but not aerospace, which was just really strange.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to go into aerospace, and I was a product of the space program. I grew up, Pratt & Whitney was in my hometown. I took classes there in high school. And so it got me excited about aerospace. And I was little, I was like 6 or 7 when they landed on the moon.
Oh man.
And
yeah.
So that was like the promise of aerospace. It was like, I wasn't going to be a mechanical engineer. I'm going into space.
There you go.
Way more interesting. What does a 17 and 18-year-old know about the difference between aerospace and mechanical engineering? Is not much, right? So I wanted to go to aerospace, and I didn't want to go that far from home. I could have gone. I was looking at University of Washington in Seattle, another big aerospace school.
Yeah.
Like Embry-Riddle, a big aerospace school. Sure. But I went to Syracuse, had a Air Force scholarship, and I did really well in college. Syracuse was a great fit for me. And I graduated top of my class. I was the class marshal, and I graduated with this. I was a distinguished graduate with the Air Force, and I got a regular commission when I got out. When I was active, when I started as a regular Air Force officer, which was a big deal for an ROTC person, because you usually start as a reserve officer. And I got stationed at Wright-Patterson. And Patterson was a great Air Force base to get stationed at as an aerospace engineer, because they're buying all of the upgraded Air Force systems.
All right.
And it was interesting because at Wright-Patterson, there were 40 generals and 400 colonels and 2,000 lieutenants.
Very officer heavy. And for those listening, so Wright-Patt Air Force Base is, because I often talk about the fact that most people in the government are never going to be able to buy anything from you, right? There's an officer corps, but Wright-Patt is like the mecca of acquisitions in the Air Force. Right. It is like the biggest acquisitions base. They're buying everything. And that's why it's so officer heavy, because it's military officers make up our program managers, our engineers, our contracting officers, just any acquisition space, including Hanscom, which is a smaller version. Yeah, very heavy on the officer side.
It was an awesome way to get started in aerospace engineering. I was started off in an aircraft structures office. And so basically, one of my first projects was upgrading the bomb systems on F-15s and making sure that they had the structural integrity. The wings had the structural integrity to carry new weapon systems. And so those programs were called Seek Eagle. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of different testing and modeling of the planes. And actually, the companies did all of that. And we just oversaw it, make sure they were following the military standards. So I got my master's degree in mechanical engineering.
Very cool. And did you get that from AFID, or was that through Syracuse also? Or?
No, I went to University of Dayton, because that was the school that was in town. And it was funny because it was all lieutenants in my class. We're all second lieutenants getting our master's degrees. It was just like a continuation of college, getting stationed at Wright-Patt. I had so many friends. All of my classmates in aerospace engineering from Syracuse got stationed at Wright-Patt.
Oh, awesome.
So it was like we'd meet Friday happy hour. It was just like we were back in college again at the officers club. I really loved my time in the Air Force. So after I got my master's degree in mechanical, I talked to my boss and I said, I'm not sure I'm going to make this a career. What office? Because we were a matrix organization. So we were like the engineering home office, and we were part out to program offices. And I said, what office could I go into that could give me a lot of exposure to what's going on in industry? And he said, I have a great opportunity for you, because nobody in this office wants to go there, but you might love it. And it was an electronic warfare office. And so I was a mechanical engineer doing electronic reliability in an office supporting 40 different programs. Wow. So here I am, 24 years old, going to all of these different electronic defense contractors, making sure that their reliability testing procedures were up to snuff. And I was also working on source selections. And so we get to DoD contracting. So I was the engineer reviewing these engineering proposals for different electronic warfare systems. And I learned a lot about proposal writing and proposal reviewing. And luckily for me, there was a huge sea state change towards the end of my time in the Air Force, where the Air Force stopped telling the defense contractors what to do, and they started just telling them what they needed. And so I had to rewrite a bunch of specifications. So basically, we didn't tell them how they should do their testing anymore, but we required that the electronics be built more robustly, because electronics fail for mechanical reasons. They fail with connector problems. They fail because of vibrations. Like you put a piece of electronics on a fighter plane, it's getting shaken up a lot more than it is anywhere else.
Yeah.
And when I was 25, I was rewriting all of these new testing standards for electronics. And I got out of the Air Force, and I parlayed that into a business of writing test standards, testing procedures for companies, for electronic companies. All of the aerospace companies, and then all of the car manufacturers became my clients. And I wrote papers on durability testing for electronics, which was a very different field than electronic reliability, which is all probabilistic in nature. My tests were all mechanical engineering in nature. So we would heat up and cool down the electronics and stress test them. We'd put them on vibration shakers, and we'd find out vibration instabilities between the cards and their holders and what was causing these components to break in planes. And it was really cool. Like General Motors their electronics division was one of my big clients when I got out. So
Right.
I did that business for about 5 years. I worked for a lot of government contractors, like Hughes was one of my big clients, Boeing. And then I had a training class, and it was called Avionics Integrity and how do you improve the integrity of avionics. But I did that for a couple of years. And I wrote a bunch of proposals too. I was pretty good. My track record was pretty good with winning.
So let me ask you this. What did you learn? Because obviously it sounds like you used a lot of what you knew, not just from being an engineer, but of course, being on these review boards for proposals. And I've had to oversee quite a few of these and be involved with it. What did you learn that helped you later on when you were writing proposals?
I learned that you just can't copy from one proposal to the next. Right. I really had to show some pretty rigorous engineering analysis of the electronics design from a mechanical perspective and how it would work reliably in the more rugged environment.
Right.
So the companies weren't used to doing that. They were used to just saying, we ran this probabilistic analysis and this is how the components are going to work. That's not good enough. We had to show the integrity of the solder and the integrity of the design processes. And I actually had to help them design their test labs and that type of thing. So it had to show a little bit more capability and an ability to actually deliver a robust product.
Interesting. Yeah, there's so much you can gain from that, especially seeing, okay, what areas are being scored down because they're maybe just hand waving it, and what areas you really have to focus on and put attention at. So you learned that, and now you've been using that after I guess you got out of the Air Force and you started writing proposals. Let's talk about that. Where did that take you?
That was interesting because I was so junior when I got out. I got promoted to captain after I was out because I was in the IRR, the Individual Ready Reserve. Yeah. But I got out as a first lieutenant. I got out 3 years because they were offering this early out program. It was during the budget cuts in the late 80s, and they were trying to get rid of first lieutenants because we were more expensive than second lieutenants. So I volunteered. The needs of the Air Force always come first. And so I took that into account.
There you go.
I really wanted to start my own company, which is pretty risky at 25. But I think, what the heck? What's going to be the worst thing that's going to happen is I will make a ton of contacts, right? Yeah. And I'll find a company that I really like. I did get a lot of job offers from my clients. And I learned a lot about running businesses. But one of the things I say, and I still say it to this day, your strengths lead to your weaknesses. I had such a thriving business writing proposals, doing those test specs, test designs, designing the labs, that I didn't really learn how to sell. I didn't really learn how to market that well. And I wanted to create a mass market product, right? So in 1995, and I had started studying how to teach more effectively because I was teaching classes to defense contractors on avionics integrity. And I really wanted to become better at teaching. Yeah. And so I got involved with ASTD at the time, and I think they're called ASD now, but I joined some groups on accelerated learning. And it really activated my avocational interests in teaching. My parents were both teachers, so I think it's part of my DNA.
Yeah.
And then I took some educational psychology classes, and I took classes on designing accelerated learning curriculum and got really into that. And so in 1995, so I started my first business in 87. In 1995, I really wanted to create a whole bunch of online curriculum, which then we're talking 1995.
Yeah, that's hard.
Right? Yeah. I had 300 colleges selling my online courses, and they were all business development type courses using this accelerated learning system I'd created for online learning. I didn't have anybody registering. So that was my first, right? That was my first business I tanked. It was called Wired for Success.
You said that, I just want to back up a little bit. You said that you needed to learn how to sell because you wanted to create a mass market product, but you clearly at least knew how to sell on a limited basis because you were working with all the big defense contractors, it sounds, and all these companies.
I had no competition.
Yeah. How did you sell it?
I called them. I do presentations. I was pretty well written author in this field. And I would just call these companies and I would say, hey, I understand you're bidding on XYZ. And I said, when I won my first contract out the door, I won the company $40 million. And I said, I wrote the proposal for this company and I know you guys are bidding on it. Would you like to talk to me about it? And usually I'd call all of them. I'd call everybody bidding on it. And always one of them would hire me. And so you guys, I'm calling everybody. So I would get hired.
That's really smart. So
Yeah.
how would you, because there are people listening probably wondering, okay, like today, obviously things are a lot different with solicitations and everything today, at least from a standpoint of what
I'm
tools
not
you
sure I'm
use.
comfortable telling how I got my information
Well,
because it was my friend still at Right Pat who told me who was bidding.
oh, I see. Very well. Hey, but hey, relationships are a big part of selling to the
Yeah.
government. No question about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, my friends at Right Pat would tell me, I said, who's bidding on this contract? And they'd give me their names and everything. And I would just call them. And the funny thing is, this was 1987. I
Yeah.
did this till 1994, 95. Yeah, I think it was maybe 96. I still had some clients there.
Yeah.
In there. But that was 9 years. I did it for 9 years. And I would call them and talk to them and chat them up. And it did take some chutzpah, okay,
Yeah.
to call this person. But I would send them my papers that I'd written and they had heard about me and a little bit of negotiation back and forth. The funniest thing is I was working with this one company up in Michigan and I always put the red team together.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I'd hire these retired generals. The first red team
That's
I put
funny.
together was with my very first contract. My boss from the Air Force, he retired 3 months after I left.
Very nice.
And he had worked on a
Hired
lot
him.
of source selection. So he was the first one I hired on my red team. And so I'm
Excellent.
out there and now I'm his boss. And that was so funny. And then the whole red team, when I was there at my first contract, I met a bunch of other people doing red teams. And so I asked them if they would like to be on red teams with me on future contracts. So I would bring in my red team and we'd beat up their contract.
Mhm.
And so I'm out to dinner with one of these retired generals up in Michigan, and he's really happy about his hourly rate. He wasn't on my team yet for red teams, right? And
Yeah.
and I was twice his hourly rate.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so he's telling me I'm making great money. I said, so I don't mean to ask, but what are they paying you an hourly rate? And he said, if you come on my red team, I'll double that. And so my red teams were getting twice as much because we were winning.
Yeah.
And that was funny. I think I was 26 or 27 then. And wow.
That's awesome. And it also just goes to show a lot of, because I had a similar experience. I stayed in a little bit longer than you, but yeah, a lot of colonels and even generals that are out there, they're retiring. They want to do things like consulting. They want to work on these projects. A lot of them don't know how to sell, and a lot of them don't want to sell either. And I've had that. Hey, Rick, get me the work. I don't want to sell. Just tell me what to do and put me on it. Here are my rates. And that's interesting. It's empowering too. And it's funny. You're so young doing that and being so successful.
But I think the Air Force helped me become as ballsy as I was.
Yeah.
Because I look young now. Okay. I'm 61. I look like I'm 40s. Okay. In my 20s, I looked like I was 15. Right. Okay. And so I'm in there and I'm in companies and I'm the customer and I'm talking to 50-year-old guys.
Yeah.
And I'm telling them, your approach isn't going to work here. We need to work. We need to get on board with these new test specs. We need to get on board with this new mil spec approach. And I remember I was at this one Edwards. I was at Edwards Air Force Base, and we were doing this really cool test on this new trainer that was twin tails. And this guy lived behind my in-laws, right? Mm-hmm. And he was my in-laws' age, and he kept calling me little girl.
Yeah.
And I said, "Excuse me, you need to refer to me as Lieutenant LeBras." And I said, and I'm not, you can't call me little girl. That's offensive.
Yeah.
And
this is back in the 80s, right?
This is back in the 80s. And I wrote him up.
Good.
Right. I wrote him up. I filed a complaint. He didn't stop calling me little girl. And it was offensive. And so I wrote him up. And I met my in-laws for Thanksgiving. And they're like, yeah, he lost his job.
Oh, no. You know what?
I'm like, hey, you can't call your customer, you can't be offensive to the customer. What do you think you're going to do? So, I mean, like, I learned to be my own advocate in the Air Force. And the Air Force was like, I'm the customer. You don't put up with that behavior. That's disrespectful. It's insulting. And I called it executive presence. The Air Force, anybody listening to that, the Air Force officer training program teaches you executive presence at such a young age.
Yeah.
So then it was not a big deal for me to get out of the Air Force and make these phone calls. Of course, these guys are going to hire me. I'm going to help you win $40 million.
Yeah, exactly.
It's, hey, I'm qualified. I know I'm qualified. And it's like you're helping the companies out. When that company wins, think about this. If you don't like to do sales, I want you to think about this, okay? you're not just helping that company out, you're helping everybody that company employs, you're helping that whole community. They need your service.
Yeah, it's true.
Right. And so when you look at it that way, you're not just calling to feather your own nest, right? You're calling to really help this company stay a thriving member of their community. And that makes it much easier to make the sales calls.
Yeah.
Because you have a higher calling.
It's interesting. I don't mean to cut you off, but this is a good point. And this talks to sales, I think, in general, especially today.
Mm-hmm.
Today, people don't want to pick up the phone and call somebody.
Right.
People want to use social media advertising. People want to use email campaigns. And look, I email people. We all have to email, but especially with government contracting, but even in B2B we'll talk today with B2B. If you pick up the phone and call somebody, you get into a meeting, into a room with somebody face to face. That's where a lot of the magic can happen. And I think chutzpah, or however you want to, whatever you want to put a label on it, that's going to separate you from everybody else. Everyone else.
And what's interesting, what got me the most amount of business was an actual letter. I got a bunch of addresses. I sent out a letter to 40 people that I knew. I put together this great list, and I sent an actual letter, and then it was in a big envelope and I don't remember, some little gift. People opened it, and then they called me.
Oh, nice.
And then I had a conversation with them, and I booked so much business from that 40-piece mailing. It was unbelievable. So you can't you can't say, I'm the standard thing about selling, I'm interrupting somebody, or they don't want to hear from me, or any of the stupid self-talk that's going in your head. Yeah. And what if they reject me? Oh, big deal. They haven't ever accepted you in the first place, so they can't reject you.
Don't get into sales if you don't want to deal with rejection. I like hearing no. Like, I want to hear no. Make them say no. Good. Yeah. I'll get you off my list, or just keep hitting you and move on to the next.
Yeah, but a mass market product is much different. So I'm business to business consumer now. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to learn about another thing is I'm like, my friends joke, I'm a rocket scientist, right? Because I have an aerospace engineering degree. Yeah. I'm not a rocket scientist, right?
You can tell them that, though.
Yeah, I just think it's funny. And how can you grow that type of business that I had, right? It was so dependent on my expertise.
That's true.
And so I wanted to grow a business. I wanted to have a real business that was scalable, that I could grow. And that's one of the reasons why I got into education, because it's much easier to grow an education business than it is a consulting business. And I didn't want to compete in consulting with like McKinsey or Anderson. And I didn't want to go join them either. I didn't want, that's not what I wanted my life to be.
Sure.
And also, when you look at scalability, when you're charging per the hour, how can you scale that?
Yeah, you're right. I feel like you're business coaching me right now, right? Same thing that I encountered starting a consulting company outside of the Air Force, right? Now, all of a sudden it's okay. They won't hire me because of my expertise, but very quickly my time is gone. So I have to find either other people with my expertise or figure out something different, which is why we have the academy now, because it's training. Yeah,
exactly. That's why I got into training. And I loved accelerated learning. From a human potential perspective, after I failed my first company, Wired for Success, it was down in flames. I got divorced. I lost my house. No. Business failure. And I was 33 years old, or 34 or something. I was around that time.
Yeah.
And I think it was 35. I finally threw in the towel and went and got a job as a research scientist in systems engineering for the Pratt & Whitney engineering research company. I moved back home.
Yeah.
And I lived 3 miles from my parents. They helped me raise my kids. It was fantastic. But when I was there was like 150 engineers and scientists who called themselves project managers and 250 different ways of doing projects. And I was a very good facilitator. I had learned all of these great facilitation skills in my government contracting business.
Yeah.
And so I started facilitating project disaster recovery with these teams. And it was fun, and I was relaunching their projects with them. Mm-hmm. And so my boss wanted me to create a facilitations course. And I said, we need a really simple project management course here. And I had been taking accelerated learning classes, and I knew that this base, project management, was really ripe for some really good curriculum design. Right. And she says to me, we're sending people to a 5-day course on project management. I don't really want you wasting your time doing that. And I said, obviously that 5-day course is not working.
Yeah, obviously.
Because I have meetings scheduled out the kazoo relaunching people's projects, because once a research scientist hits the roadblock and their projects are spiraling out of control, it's hurting their career.
Yeah.
They needed help quick. So they got rid of my department.
Why did they do that?
Because the department was obviously not effective. They're sending people to this 5-day class. People still.
I gotcha. Right.
So they kept me on board, and they had me report to the chief operating officer of the company. They wanted me to continue facilitating my meetings.
Good.
And so I asked the head of the company if I could create a 1-day project management class. And he said, go for it. And I designed this really fun class using accelerated learning to teach how to do good project management in 1 day. And it was very interactive. It was really fun. And so I was teaching it all of the divisions. And he calls me into his office about a year of this shenanigans of me being an entrepreneur in this large corporation. And he goes, I am very proud of you. You've done such a great job with your training class. He goes, but the problem is we're a research center.
Yeah.
And he said, we're getting known for being a training place. So we don't want to be known for being a training place. He goes, so I would like you to take your course and leave.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And he goes, but if you don't want to do that, because we like you, we have a new home for you. And they wanted me to go back to doing like durability electronic stuff, right?
Yeah.
He goes, we have a home for you as a research scientist. We know you're a good engineer. He said, I'll pave the way. Because when you create a product for somebody else, they don't usually let you leave and take it.
Yeah, you're right.
But they didn't
take it.
Yeah, but they let me take it. And I picked door number 1.
Yeah,
I'm an entrepreneur. I picked door number 1. And I said, I really appreciate the offer about the other job, because it was nice. I was a single mom. It was risky, right? I had already failed a business. When you fail in one business, you're a little gun shy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my brother had just made it big with one of his companies.
Oh, really? Good.
And he said, I think you should go for it. He goes, and I'll back you up, right? Which is nice. I came from a large family. We have each other's back. So that was nice. And so I jumped ship and I started Cheetah. And I wrote a book called Cheetah Project Management. And it was so funny because when I designed my course and I wrote my book, I did not know about the Project Management Institute, right? Talk about nincompoop, right?
Well, I'll tell you what, as a former program manager, I hear about your 1-day course. The training on program management, I'm getting a headache just thinking about the years, not just, hey, a 5-day course, trainings after trainings, nonstop. Nobody could possibly retain all of the information. 99% of it, they're not going to use anyway. I would love to even hear just a little bit about what's involved in that program management course you have.
The project management. My first book was Cheetah Project Management. And it was basically, how do you get the whole team together really quick on who needs to do what when? And I needed to be taken seriously. So I had to get the PMP.
Okay. Yeah.
And so the project management professional. And I looked at that. It was back in 2001. And the project management body of knowledge was written like a mil-spec. And people were studying this document for 6 months. And at 40% of them were failing the exam. And this exam had been around for 15 years. And there were only 40,000 people certified. I said, this is insane.
Mm-hmm.
This is insane. There's no reason people need to spend 6 months studying this. So I rolled out a program and did it in 4 days. And I had my students go in and take the actual exam on the 5th day. So in order to do that, I had to work with them ahead of time to get their eligibility application in. So that was one of the big things different that we did, is we made sure our students were eligible before they even started our class, and they'd go in and take the test on the 5th day. The first time I rolled it out was the week of 9/11.
Oh, no.
We're all out on break. We're in Massachusetts, Marlborough, Mass.
Marlborough.
And we saw the plane fly into the second building, all of us, and from the class. So we decided together as a class what we were going to do. And we all decided to continue because they couldn't go anywhere anyways. My students had flown in from all over the US.
Sure.
They couldn't go anywhere. And every single one of them passed the exam, which was great. My very first class for that. Mm-hmm. And it took off like wildfire. But luckily, I had learned a lot. And so I had already set the company up. So when I bombed my Wired for Success company, I had gotten a lot of business creating people's websites because I had to create a website for Wired for Success.
Yeah.
I had to
And
do a
back
website.
then that wasn't like making a website today.
No, it wasn't. And so I knew how to do websites, and I had created the whole back-end course management system for Cheetah. And so basically the company had all of the infrastructure in place to take off, to scale. And because I had set up a business to scale with Wired for Success. So
Yeah.
I just took all of my infrastructure from Wired for Success and I rolled it into Cheetah.
And
so
what year was this now? When
2001.
Okay, gotcha.
So my company grew. 2001, I made $250,000. 2002, I made $2.5 million. By 2005, I was making $15 million a year.
Wow.
And so it was all because I had known how to create the scalable back-end web system.
Oh,
and so we've had 80,000 students in the past 22 years go through Cheetah.
And how did you start getting so many people into the system? Was a lot of it word of mouth? Were you advertising?
We were great at viral marketing. I'd learned a lot doing Wired for Success. And I would give away for free just about what everybody was selling. So I had this free guide that was mostly the same thing that was in most people's classes.
Mm-hmm.
And we help people get eligible. So that's a big deal, because what I didn't know at the time is that, let's say that you go take someone else's class and you're not eligible yet to take the PMP.
Mm-hmm.
Over 50% of the people won't even do the eligibility application because they're so freaked out.
Yeah.
By what's required, and they don't think they're qualified. So we cut that off at the pass by making them do the eligibility application before they come to class, because then they're on the hook to take the test. 98% of our students pass the test the first time. Wow. So we actually grew the entire industry, because now there's over 1 million people who have PMP certified. So we went from 40,000 people in 2001 to now over 1 million. So Project Management Institute gave us all types of awards, named me one of the most influential women in project management worldwide, which was really great for business.
Yeah, I bet.
My whole idea, though, in 1995 was to run a virtual company.
And now you're doing it. It sounds
now
like
I'm doing it because of COVID.
Yeah.
Because of COVID, I had virtual and online training forever for Cheetah, right? And then in COVID, we had everything all set up and ready to go. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom.
And then it just went, huh?
All to virtual. And then in 2021, I was becoming really well known for finishing projects very fast. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I was bored in Alaska. I was living in Alaska. And I was spending my whole day on the computer. So I don't know if anybody else can commiserate with it. Right? And I said, you know what? I need to get out in the public more, but I'm bored going to meetings and stuff like that. So I set up a business that would get me outside of the house more. And it was a spice company. So it's called Alaska Spice Shop. And I set it up. I took Christmas vacation. And in 2 weeks over Christmas vacation, I set up Alaska Spice Shop. And I called one of my friends who ran a little gift store, and I was telling her about what I was doing, and I wanted to know how much she thought I could sell my spices for. And I had these little funny names like Roadkill Rub and Poultrygeist, and they're just really funny spice blend names. She said, "Are you going to the gift show in Anchorage next week?" And I said, "What is that?" She goes, "It's where all the people selling stuff like what you sell get together, and then the buyers from the stores all around Alaska that support the cruise ship industry will buy their products." I said, "I will see if I can go now." And that was only 2 weeks into setting up the business. And luckily I had already the labels designed and I had the website up and stuff. So I went and we took over the market because our main competitor didn't show up.
Oh, fantastic.
So 3 weeks in, I had like massive amount of business for the spice shop. And then we had to deliver. And it was really remarkable. People were like, "You've only been in business 2 weeks." Like my friends who were other business owners said, "That's just amazing what you did in 2 weeks."
Yeah, you got the golden touch.
So I said, you know what, it's a process I follow.
Yeah.
So I decided to write that into a book called Cheetah Agile Projects. And it's how to finish significant projects in 2 weeks. That's pretty significant to have a business go from nothing to taking over the market.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
So that's what my Cheetah Agile Project book is about. And it's about how do you get significant projects. And we're not talking we're talking like massive projects done in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, that's huge. And that's the book I'm looking at, I think, right now.
That's the book you're looking at. So I have a 4-week course on how to do this, and you become Cheetah Agile certified. And what's really cool about this is Agile is a big name in project management these days.
Right.
I don't know if you heard about it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, so it's big in software, but I use it for everything, right? And so my students become Cheetah Agile certified in 4 weeks. But the really cool thing about it is it's tied into LinkedIn. I have a credential that's tied into LinkedIn. And so the starting salaries for people who are Agile certified is $110,000.
It's a great salary.
It's a great salary. So basically, I could take a 25-year-old like I was at 25, right? They can go through my Cheetah Agile certified class, and in 4 weeks, they'll be Cheetah Agile certified. They throw it up on their LinkedIn, and they can be off and running as a certified Agile project manager in 4 weeks.
That's perfect. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like I should have taken one of your courses, but we just launched a CRM designed for
Yeah,
selling to
yeah.
the government because we saw that nothing really worked out of the box. But it did not take 2 weeks to put that together. I can tell you, probably would have helped to have some of that training for me and the team.
Yeah. So I break everything now down into 2-week increments. I just finished building a new home for the spice business. Okay.
Oh, nice.
Because I spent a lot of time up in Alaska during COVID, and it was like, I'm getting older. I couldn't leave because of COVID. It was hard to move around, and they stopped the ferry service and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know what? I need to find a new home for like the next 20 years. It's not going to be here.
Not going to be
And
Alaska.
plus, I got tired of walking through 5 feet of snow to get to my spice shop.
Oh, yeah.
So I built a new place that has the spice shop commercial kitchen within my house, which is cool. And I sold my other house, and so I had to get it finished. So I had 8 weeks to finish it, and we didn't have the floor in. It was just finishing the sheetrock. The sheetrock had just gotten finished, and I had 8 weeks to finish the house.
And you managed to do that?
Yes, I did 4 2-week sprints.
Okay. And you must have been controlling the teams putting that house together because...
Yeah, I bought a camper, and I lived on site. And I was managing the teams. And so every morning we have what's called the daily stand-up. We'd have a daily stand-up. We talk about what they did yesterday, what we did today, what are any of the roadblocks. My doing job was chopping down all their roadblocks so they could do the work. What type of people do we need to bring in? Everybody that was there had a say in who I brought in because the team dynamics were really important. And it was funny because I had this one guy that came over and we were interviewing him for tiling, and he left, and everybody said, don't hire him. We don't like him. So I didn't hire him. They all had to say managing your team is really important. And we just did 2-week sprints. And so we got the whole floor in, and the trim went in 2 weeks. We trimmed out a huge facility in 2 weeks. It was incredible. It was a mind-blowing 8 weeks.
I think most people listening to this probably have their minds blown if they ever even just tried to do a renovation project in their house that should have taken a month. All of a sudden turns into a 6-month project for some reason. I know we're running short on time. So before we close, what would I be doing if I didn't ask you about your government contracts or how you sell to the government? I know we talked a little bit before this, and you have a little bit of a different approach. Typically, we're talking about more traditional government contracts, the $40 million ones you're working on.
Yeah, we don't do that.
But there are some products and there are some solutions where it works. I usually refer to it as bottoms up selling, where typically you're not targeting the user in the government, but there are some circumstances where you can do that. And yours is obviously one of them. Can you tell us a little bit about that for people that maybe have a product that's a lower price or something that's maybe training, something along these lines? It might give some people some ideas on what'll work for them.
All right. So we do have corporate accounts, right? And we are getting back on the GSA list for corporate accounts. But a lot of our business, we call it business to business consumer. So like we have a lot of people from FAA. I was talking about the Coast Guard. Like this one office in the Coast Guard, everybody that gets PMP certified is just go through Cheetah, like Los Alamos National Labs, Sandia National Labs. It's just known, just go through Cheetah. And we make the price point low enough that they can do it on their card.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big deal.
On a GPC card.
That you have to make sure you know what the price point is, right? And you can't make your product over that because then people can't pay for it. So we also have a government rate.
Mm-hmm.
So they all know what the government rate is, and they just put that in, and then they get the Cheetah government rate. But once you have, like, we've always been business to business consumer. And early on, I met somebody who ran a pretty successful training company, but their biggest client was Chase.
Mm-hmm. And
Chase canned them and they lost their company. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I would rather I have 80,000 students from all over the place. And they're the ones who refer business to us, right?
Yeah.
You got to make sure that your price point is something that an individual can spend if you're going to go to business consumer. And the GSA pricing is really important to us because it really helps me negotiate with other companies because they want me to give them preferential terms. I'm like, I cannot give you anything more preferential than what I have given the GSA.
Right. That's
So-
right. You can't make an offer that's lower than that price that the government
Right.
can buy your product on. Yeah.
So it's helped me tremendously. So I have highly recommend that people, because it makes negotiating so much easier. And then I just had this guy, he said last week, don't take advantage of me. Give me a fair rate. I said, I am giving you the GSA rate. And I said, I cannot give you a lower rate than the GSA rate. So this is the lowest I can go. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And
No,
that
you're
has
right.
made, it's made negotiating very easy. So that's the number one thing I would do. Just work on getting on that GSA list. Make sure that if you have a low price point product that people can buy it, whether they're calling the UPT card. And then we have something called the cage code that's really important you have.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you have all those little boxes checked.
Sure.
We have FAA, HUD, Homeland Security, a lot of different weird agencies come through us too. They're a bunch of alphabet soup. And I'd say 40% of my business is federal government.
Yeah. That's interesting because it's a different way of thinking about selling to the government. If you have, whether it's a training or even maybe a tool that's lower priced, GPC card, it used to be $10,000 or less could go in a GPC card.
Mhm.
For people that don't know, like every office is going to have a government purchase card, a government credit card, because they have to buy office supplies. They have to buy, they're not doing these 2-year-long competitions to buy some of the office furniture that you might need or something small. But so whether it is certification, I know booksellers that do this as well, because it's, hey, I'm going to sell you 100 leadership books for your squadron and you can hit your government rate. But you can also not necessarily, so this is technically not a government contract, but you can also sell directly to the individual. So if you have everybody in the FAA sending their people to your certification program, so I, Ricky Howard, I might be paying for it with my personal credit card, but I'm still a member of the FAA. It's a method of targeting. And then maybe I'm getting reimbursed because the government, we were both in the Air Force. The Air Force is great at, so is the military, other military services at reimbursing you for what you pay for things like certifications in school. It might be something that the GI Bill can reimburse you for. You just never know.
Yeah, so I'm going to put a big plug in for PMP. I think PMP, getting the project management professional, especially if you're in the military right now, is a great career transition. Credential, because it's so easy to get a job as a project management professional.
Oh yeah, I know plenty of people that have done that. I would say that maybe the CISP if you're a cyber person, the PMP is probably the number one certification people are thinking about when they come out.
So we have a number of defense contractors too that are our clients. Some of the big IT ones put a couple hundred people through a year. Because but one of the reasons is because they can charge 3 times more for that project manager. Our price point is higher than our other competitors, but the reason is because people pass the test in 4 days. They don't have to spend 6 months. So if you're a defense contractor and you're going after defense contracts, you need a PMP to run that contract, but you also can charge more for that person. So we charge about $4,500 for our class. So it costs about $5,000 total when you factor in the test. Right. So when you get that person certified in 4 days and it costs $5,000 and you can now raise their rate from $120 to $360 an hour, you get a payback in 4 days on that. So do you want to take that and stretch it out for 6 months? You're losing $90,000. Like, why do you want to do that? So basically, if a company says, oh, we can get it from XYZ for $2,000, great, good luck, go with them. Because 6 months later, you're only going to have 50% of the people certified. And if you have 50% will take the exam and maybe 30% will pass with that other approach. But if you come through us, 100% of them are going to be passed because we guarantee they pass if they don't refund your money. And you'll have them certified in a week and you can start charging more money for your time. Now you have to give them a raise of about $30,000, but you're making almost $500,000 more on their time.
Yeah. It's a win.
It's a no-brainer for defense contractors. It's
absolutely.
Like, why wouldn't you want your project managers to be PMP certified and get them certified really fast?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great exercise in thinking outside the box a little bit if you're a company as far as government contracting is concerned, because you have, and I always recommend multiple streams of income. The same reason we were talking about earlier, you're like, hey, I don't want to be the company where if one client cancels me, I'm done.
Right.
If you have commercial, whether it's B2B or B2C, if you have government contracts, that's a great way to build your business. But you can also think about, what about the defense contractors? What about the primes that are selling to the government?
Right.
What can I provide to them? Sometimes it's not necessarily you being on one of their contracts listed as a subcontractor.
Right.
You might be supplying them with something or training their people like you're doing.
And then basically helping them improve their bottom line and their profitability.
Yeah.
Because we did a return on equity analysis. With return on equity shows how much are they better using their resources. And we did it for all the companies that hired us for corporate accounts. And we showed 90% of them within a year had a very high return on equity, an increase in return on equity. And that's directly because the people were PMP certified. So PMP isn't just a certification. Well, not the way we teach. It's not just a certification to get you more money from the government. It's a certification to make your people better at project management and more productive in project management. And that's the way we teach it. We teach it so that when you learn project management from Cheetah, you never forget it. We like get into your neural networks. And somebody once said, I have this material tattooed on my frontal lobes now. And that's what we do with accelerated learning. We do some really fascinating things. And a lot of people will take our course just to experience accelerated learning, because we say this is like outward bound for your brain.
Yeah.
Because when you spend 4 days studying something as intensely as the PMP with us, and then you go and you take that test, a really hard test, and you pass it on the 5th day, your self-concept is forever changed.
Absolutely. That's for those that haven't looked into it, that is a huge, like, monumental certification that you have to prepare for and get. It's outside of getting a college degree or something. You're right. Usually people have to take months studying and preparing for this thing, and then you got to take it. And I'm just thinking, again, I'm getting a headache having to think about it. But obviously I would much rather jump into something like your course and be done with it in 5 days, have my certification, and actually know and understand the material. Before we close up, could you I've got 2 asks. I've got one is, what advice would you have for the small business owner, entrepreneur that's just getting started, thinking about doing some government contracting or selling to the government, whether traditionally or maybe like you are? And then the next thing is, if you could tell everyone like where they could find you and your material, and if they're interested in taking the course, where do they go?
We're at cheetahlearning.com, the cat cheetah, right? CHEETAH. And it's so funny because when I started this on the East Coast, people were like, are you saying cheater learning? Are you not using your R? No, it's cheetah, like the cat, CHEETAH learning.com. And another thing is, I'm going to put up something on our website we can talk about. I can make a little landing page for you. And when you go to publish this, that your listeners can go to. So the Cheetah Agile project, we're going to give you $500 off for your listeners.
Oh, very cool.
And so I'll put the link up for that with a promo code for you. And for Cheetah Learning, for the PMP, I'll also put a promo code up for you so your listeners can get 5% off for that. Oh. But I guess you could put it in your link, but just go to cheetahlearning.com if you don't want to go to Ricky's link. But that's the way to find us. What else did you ask me? You asked me 2 questions.
Just advice you have for that new business owner. Going after those government contracts.
I have some advice for the new business owner. Sales. You really got to get good at sales, no matter whatever you're uncomfortable with, you really got to lean into it. And I am perpetually working on sales. Now, I just hired a new sales team. They're doing great. And I learn a lot from them, and I'm running like crazy to support them. Sales is the number one. And like Contract Academy, I'm sure, is going to teach you how to get business. But learning how to get business, learning how to do sales, it's interesting because you're going to be jack of all when you're getting going. Yep. And you will avoid doing the hard stuff, which sales is the hard stuff. So when I started, I created this little system called the Sales and Marketing Accelerator System. Mm-hmm. And it was more so for me to be disciplined. And every day I had to post it for different things: PR, marketing, content development. Every morning I started with 10 prospecting calls. I took a class on sales, and that's what we recommended, professional prospecting. And now that's easy to do with LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You can get Sales Navigator, and you can do 10 prospecting calls the first thing every morning. Make yourself do it because that's your lifeblood of your business. Even when you got a contract, even when you're busy, you start out every day making your 10 prospecting calls. Your business is going to be on fire.
Yeah, that is great advice. No sales equals no business. And I
Right.
think a lot of business owners struggle with that kind of sine wave of, especially in the beginning. I certainly did sell and win. Okay, the selling stops. I'm doing the job because you don't have a big team yet. And then, okay, maybe a client or two go away and now you got to sell again. But you need that discipline that you're talking about of selling every day. It just takes a little bit every day.
Every day.
You can grow, you can flourish, you can keep bringing in new work and maybe not have to stop everything you're doing to avert a crisis at the end of the day.
And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you got into your business because there was something you did that you loved, there's some type of value you're bringing, and you're not a natural salesperson, right? None of us are. Okay. And it was so funny. The first sales class I took, the guys like people that need help.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
If you stumble and you're not perfect and you do some mistakes, people are going to like you more. Right.
True.
So don't beat yourself up. And it's hard. It's hard to pick up the phone. It's still hard for me to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just not my natural inclination. And so just do it. Especially if you're a former military, you're used to doing hard stuff. It wasn't easy going through officer training and getting up at 5 a.m. and going running every morning. That was not easy. Okay.
It's funny how you have some people that would not even think twice about getting in a plane and flying into combat but they don't want to pick up the phone and call somebody or send an email or even reach out on LinkedIn. Oh, I can't post something here about my business to get some PR or whatever your marketing goals are. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And sales is everything as far as keeping your business growing. And that is great advice.
Yeah. So learn how to sell and don't be afraid of it.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for coming on here today. This has been an awesome conversation. As everyone can probably tell, we probably could have gone on for another hour here, just let the conversation going. So may warrant another one here sometime in the future. We're gonna hold off on any questions about the course itself today. Those we can handle on another coaching call. You can hit me up in the community page. But today's going to be all about proposal writing, solicitations, and potentially, unique problem sets with contracts. All right, Colonel, over to you.
All right. Well, I'll take it from there. What I'd like to add to what Rick said, thank you very much for that very kind intro. Yeah, 30 years in Air Force and DoD contracting as a multi-hat. It was often a program manager as well as a contracting officer, multiple unlimited warrants in a lot of different arenas. But what was really the valuable part of my career, I was a commander for DCMA 3 different times. And what I say about DCMA is this is really an organization that once a contract is written, the contract officer kind of tosses it over to DCMA to administer the contract. And this is where you get to clean up all the messes. You have to fix all the things that the contract got wrong, both from the contractor perspective and the government's perspective. So I had a fabulous career of unraveling the problems and coming up with, solutions. And it really helped me kind of see, you learn a lot by solving those problems and cleaning up the messes. And to me, that was invaluable. What I'm going to take just a few minutes, and I have a thing that I want to plug in for this group.
And hey, Colonel, could you just quickly define DCMA? Because a lot of people, and that just popped in there. A lot of people probably don't know what DCMA is. So maybe just a quick overview of what it does and why that's important.
All right, excellent. So under the Department of Defense, there's a couple of agencies that are supporting across all of the different services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. These agencies are like Defense Logistics Agencies, Defense Contract Management Agency, Defense Contract Audit Agency, so on and so forth. So Defense Contract Management Agency is a professional organization that what they do is I think it's Part 42, administration of contracts once awarded. And that has everything to do with in-plant, on the production line, oversight that the government needs to do for the big defense contracts. And it can be anything from software to like Lockheed Martin's, F-35 production line. You have DCMA people who are watching and checking and making sure everything's being executed in accordance with the contract. They're also the ones that do acceptance of the deliverables for the contracts. Now, in some cases, the contracts aren't big enough to put it over to DCMA. They're smaller, or they're services, or, whatever. So DCMA doesn't necessarily get involved in every single contract, but the ones that I was involved with were multi-billion-dollar, weapon systems, and everything from munitions to an airborne laser that was on a 747. So you can imagine the scope of some of the interesting challenges we faced. DCMA's job is to really help the government and the contractor be successful in their delivery and execution. I look at it that way. I mean, they will probably have a different mission statement on their website, but I was involved with them quite a bit. So Defense Contract Management Agency is just a great place where, I learned a lot about how to solve those complex contract problems. So those really sticky ones, like how do we make sure that the KC-46 tanker is delivered on time? I learned a lot there that actually applies even at the smallest contracts. The fundamentals of fixing a contract problem are fairly, I wouldn't say they're universal, but they echo across all levels and all types of contracts. In doing this, I had a chance to, along my career, I had a chance to do almost everything in the FAR. If you look at the 53 parts of the FAR, there's only a few things I didn't really get a chance to be involved in. So with that, does that answer the question, Rick?
It does. I think Dr. Anderson had the question, but she's nodding.
Right. Dr. Anderson, we get a thumbs up. Okay. So the key is I like to help people solve the problems that they're facing when they're trying to do government contracting, because it can be pretty daunting. And one of the things I want to do is, as all of you, I'm going to take 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and I'm just going to talk about my favorite topic, which is kind of like setting everybody up for success. We'll call it crafting the contract. And you have a lot of say. You have a lot of control and a lot of input to the government. And a lot of times you don't know that. But when it comes to how you break out the contract, you want to do it in a couple of different ways. It's both to your advantage and the government's advantage. You have a mutual setup. The CLIN structure is very important. And a lot of times you'll see a single contract line item number, CLIN, contract line item number. And there's a whole series of how those are set up. But sometimes you will see a RFP for a single contract line item. But you can break it down. You can further break that down. And in some cases, if you're doing a fixed price, you want to break things down as much as you can, because that's cash flow. And it's also a waypoint for the government to know that everything's on track, rather than wait for a single bundle deliverable item at the end. Now, in some cases, you can't break it down, but it's important to take a hard look at, if you think you can break down the structure of the contract, then have that conversation with your contracting officer. The pros and cons of that are, again, I start with cash flow. What I see is a lot of companies will sign a contract and they're all excited. I got $1 million contract, but they realize they're not going to get $1 million for like 18 months. It's kind of hey, once you deliver everything, here's your $1 million. Well, that 18 months can be a pretty challenging 18 months. So what you want to do is figure out, how do you pull some of that $1 million to the left so you get some operating capital to actually get to that target. So just be aware, and I won't go into there's so many variables that I can't really, paint that structure too much. But what I really want to just hammer home is, be aware that you can go to the contracting officer and ask them to structure the contract structure, CLIN structure, in a way other than what they've put out there. So that's a negotiable item in your concept there. Sometimes they've got a great CLIN structure and you don't want to mess with it, but sometimes it's not really in your favor. And it's ultimately, if it's not in your favor, it's really not in the government's favor. So you want to find that structure that, gets the government what they're looking for and helps you be successful as a company. And Rick, I don't know if you cover this kind of stuff, but there's one thing about proposing and responding to a proposal, but in there's always that in the questions or in some other, interface with the government, you can always ask the question, can we adjust this CLIN structure that'll be more advantageous? And here's why. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I think that's one of those things where people don't realize that they have an opportunity to ask that question. So what Rick wanted me to do, he promised you guys we're going to be full of questions. And his suggestion is I just offer up a little bit of, a topic and then carve out a lot of time for questions and answers. So unless you want me to keep going on this topic, Rick, I think at this point, I'll just open it wide open for, any questions people have out there.
Sure. Yeah, I know me and you could probably talk for the next 4 hours without building anything here. But yeah, so yeah, anything you guys want to know, it doesn't matter how simple it is or complicated it is, because look, Colonel Orndorff just knows the answers, right, to these things. So yeah, like again, things like when he's talking about a CLIN, I know some of you guys probably are hearing that word for the first time, right? And if you haven't been on contract with the government, you're probably not used to hearing that word. So yeah, you can ask about things like that. You can ask about anything involving the process. Stephen Price, go ahead.
2 questions. It's okay if one gets shut down. I'm trying to understand the difference in the pre-solicitation. I know there's a kind of variance between sources sought and solicitation, and kind of pre-solicitation between that. So if you could provide a brief overview of that, if not, that's fine. But also protests, how, when, where, why, just a brief overview on that as well.
And just before you jump in there, Stephen's new to the group. If you guys haven't met him, we'll get a bigger introduction next week, Stephen. And we all have a meeting, right? Me, you, and Colonel Orndorff after this to review a contract that you have right now with the VA. So we're going to troubleshoot that later on, and you guys, we'll record that, and you guys will get to see that at a later date. But go ahead.
So there's a life cycle of a contract. And if it's a purchase order or a contract, we're going to use all those different terms interchangeably and just say contract. The life cycle of a contract is, and it's this is right out of the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So the FAR requires that, and I'm going to pull it up so I make sure that I get my sections right. There's a couple of things that have to happen. Part 5 talks about publicizing contract actions, and Part 10 is about market research. And what the government is required to do is, based on the size and complexity of the contract, there's a bunch of thresholds and details. They need to go out to the world, to industry, and find out what is available. So the question comes out with RFIs, draft solicitation, notices of sources sought, and various terms that you'll hear about that. And these things are posted normally on SAM.gov. And what they are is, this is the effort that the government is making to make sure they understand who's out there and what is the capabilities that are in the market, whether it's capabilities that can be developed or if it's capabilities that are currently exist, or a little bit of both. So if I'm going to go and buy a generator, for example, I want to make sure I'm clear on what is out there as far as the capabilities of a generator. What are the, power load capacities? What are the sizes? What are the fuel consumption rates? What are the specifications? So, Stephen, what I'll do is I'll set out a message to industry to say, please tell me the parameters of what power generation is available out there. So then when I put together my requirement, the actual request for proposal, request for quote, the actual official solicitation, I actually have specifications in there that I've already vetted are achievable, realistic, are existing. Or I might say, I know this doesn't exist, but I want a company to actually, propose to another level of capability. Or I just want, 15 of these items that will meet this specification. And I know there's at least 20 people out there, 20 companies out there that can offer this. So then it's just I call it a knife fight, just competition, price competition, because it's a pretty standard item. So the government will go out and try to find all the information they can up front. And sometimes market research is a couple of phone calls. Sometimes it's browsing some websites. Sometimes it's a full posting on SAM.gov. And sometimes there's multiple rounds of these RFIs. Or notices of sources sought, or again, various terms. So when you're searching, you want to kind of search on these different things. This is the stage where you have the most opportunity to influence the entire process. This is where your answers and your input, and even if they say, here's the 10 questions we want you to answer, you can always add a part during this stage that says, oh, by the way, power generation that's combined with solar has, 70% more efficiency. So you might want to consider, expanding your thinking here. And there's a new technology that we've developed that also, captures power out of the atmosphere, blah, 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 whatever. So now the government has some information. This is where you can craft what they are going to ask for. So that pre-solicitation process is a critical phase. You want to try to, get your fingers in there, and that's their influence point. And you can talk to program managers and anybody who's asking. So that rolls into, once the government has made a decision, they will develop what they call an acquisition strategy. And this is something that as contractors, you should never see this. You should never have access to the acquisition plan that the government develops. But that's going to be where they lay out, here's how we're going to do the acquisition, here's when we're going to do it, here's our timeframes, here's the approval points, here's how the funding is going to happen, and here are all the other factors that we take into account that are required. Acquisition planning is, highlighted in part 7 of the FAR. But again, this is something that we would not normally see. So there's market research, then the acquisition planning, and then the actual acquisition itself, where we go into, part 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, to actually, do the contract. So that kind of answers your question there, Stephen. I'm not going to keep going, but what we're going to do is we're going to jump all the way over to the question about protest. So the law is designed so that the process of spending money that is appropriated funds is transparent, and that anybody can see exactly what the government did. The government has to tell you what they're going to do. They have to do what they told you. And then they have to be able to show everybody that they did exactly what they said they were going to do. So in the event that the government is trying to do an acquisition and they're not following the law, or they don't follow, and this is most important, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. So, for example, they said, we're going to do an evaluation of offers, and we're going to do 3 steps, A, B, C. And we're going to make a decision based on A, B, C, factors. So then the government makes a decision, and you find that they did not follow their own, what they said they were going to do. They didn't do step B. They skipped step B and went straight to step C. You can basically stop the government, the entire process, and say, wait a minute, I doth protest. And this is, there's some very specific procedures, again, in the FAR, and, different levels in different ways. But the point of a protest is, when you made a decision, government, you didn't follow what you were supposed to follow or what you told us you were going to follow. So I want you to stop what you're doing and go back and redo it in accordance with what you were supposed to do or what you said you were going to do. Now, the outcome of that may or may not be in your favor, but at least they did what they were supposed to do. So I had a situation where a company was not selected for award, but in the process of the outbrief, the government said, we did ABC, and we went, wait a minute, that is not what you said you were going to do in order to select the winner of this particular procurement. So we filed a protest, and the government had to go back and reevaluate all offers in accordance with what they said they were going to do. Now, this particular offer, they did not win. They did not win the second time, but they had a very fair review based on what the government said they were going to do and what the company expected. Because if I tell you, hey, I need you to give me a proposal that's ABC, and I'm going to reevaluate it ABC, and then you put together a proposal based on ABC, you need a fair shake. You're trying to be competitive based on ABC. You're trying to be, technically competent based on ABC, and you're trying to answer based on what the government asked for. So it's only fair, and this is about fairness really, that the government that they actually evaluate exactly the way they told you they would, and they choose the apparent successful offer exactly the way they told you they should. Otherwise, you have the opportunity to go back and file a protest, and there's various forms and various levels to make sure they did exactly what they said they were going to do. So, Stephen, these are the two questions you asked there. I think, it's a very complex life cycle, but, those are some factors there. Did that answer your questions?
And Thelma raised her hand. Do you have a question on what he was talking about?
Yes, and thank you for your service, Colonel.
Great.
How often, since now you're on this side of it as a consultant, is that something that we're going to be running across often as, representing, or we as consultants for our clients, will we be doing protests, or is that something that you see often? Is that just like a strategy? Is it always something that the government did wrong, or
No. Well, let me let you finish your question.
no, that's pretty much it. I was just wondering,
Okay.
is that like something that are we going to be doing, or is that Coach Rick? Oh, I keep saying Coach. Sorry, Rick.
Coach.
Is that like, do you guide us on how to go about with that?
Well, let me go ahead, Rick, and then I'll answer from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, from my perspective as a consultant, I've never been involved with a protest outside of if my client was asking me if they should protest a government contracting action. So you may be involved with that. I guess you could, by the way, when I say there's hundreds of things to specialize in, you potentially could specialize in protests. And by the way, some companies, I don't think this is right, but I think some companies do use protest as a strategy just to delay things, especially at the higher level. And it kind of pissed me off from the government side. So, all right, over to you, Colonel. That's my 2 cents.
So as a consultant, this is ultimately where I come from. I want both sides to have a fair shot going through the processes as they've been described. So as a consultant, I try to make sure the companies understand the limits, left and right limits, the rules. And if the government's not doing their part, sometimes, I don't really like to represent the client with the government. What I want to do is inform the client of their options, and I do it on a risk basis. Look, what's the outcome you're looking for? Here's some different ways you can do that. Here's the pros and cons that go along with that. But ultimately, a company has to make decisions about what they want to do. So in this case, my client asked me, and we spent 2 days discussing the pros and cons of this particular action. And they ultimately had to do the entire, effort of putting the protest together. But it's about thinking it through. It's about thinking through, what do you want to do? And as a consultant, I'm really kind of at that point where I want people to make, informed decisions and be a good sounding board to help them actually think through things that they may or may not see or understand. From my experience, I can say, hey, if you go down this road, here are some of the possible outcomes. And if you don't, here's some of the, various variables there. So you asked the question, is that something we can expect to do? As a consultant, the point is that you want to be able to say, client, what is the problem that you're facing today that I can help you sort through? I'm not going to say this is the only answer. I'm going to say, here are your options, and these are the pros and cons with each one of them. And as always, I think this is your best option. I would recommend you go this way, but you have to decide what's best for you. Thelma, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think since we have a lot of people in here, why don't you guys, if you have a question, just put it in the chat, just so we can go in order. And Tashana had a question. I'm going to read this just so anyone watching this later that doesn't have access to that. And Colonel, you may want to read it because it's a long one, but I'm going to get through it here. So it says, Tashana is reviewing some solicitations and would like guidance, understanding the most critical sections to focus on. Given that some documents are 60 to 108 pages, I've seen them longer than that too. I want to ensure that my proposals directly address the requirements in the way you expect. Can you please clarify? And she has 3 points. Which sections are the most important for evaluation? What common mistakes should I avoid when structuring my response? And are there specific formatting or content preferences that will strengthen my submission?
Okay, so I see the chat. Okay, well, Tashana, this is a great question because ultimately the first round of review, you need to decide if it's a bid, no bid conversation. And here you're talking about an actual solicitation. So this is a live solicitation, which means you have a time The clock is ticking. And there are a couple of, details. And I will tell you, I'm with Rick on this one. 60 to 108 pages is moderate compared to some of the ones that you get to. So depending on the acquisition, and there's different ways that this is put together, there are three things I would look at. I'm just going to make a note so I go in order. The first thing you want to look at is the requirement and what is actually being required. And as a company or as a consultant to a company, you have to say, can we do this? Can we do this in a reasonable way? Is this in our ballpark? This is kind of that no bid, no bid conversation. I see companies who say, hey, it's a big contract. We've never done that, but we have a company and we're going to chase after that. You have to make a decision as you're reviewing this. The specification, can you do what is being asked? Can you do it in the time that's being asked? Can you do it in a quality way that's there? And can you do it for a price that is actually, probably going to be considered reasonable? So first thing you want to look at. The second thing you want to look at, and I'll come back to your conversation about technical approach and some of this. You're right. This is a multi-point question. The second thing you want to look at is it's the instructions to offer. And if it's a commercial one, I think it's 52212-102. And it'll basically go through and have some details and maybe some expanded tailored details. And this, or section L of a larger contract, the attachment L, this is where it goes through and says, here's exactly what we need you to provide to us. We need you page limitations if it has any formatting issues or whatever. But this is where it's going to say, here's exactly what we want to see. So then you look at that and can we do that? Can we generate this narrative? Can we put together this technical package in a way that in the time that we've been given? And then you look at the section M, which is the evaluation factors. And that might be, if it's commercial, I think it's 52212-2 or 3, or section M of a larger contract or some variation of that. And this is where the government's going to say, these are the exact factors we're going to consider when we decide what to award. We talked about this a little while ago with protests. You have to look at that and say, can we successfully provide a competitive, solution that will be evaluated well? And at the end of the day, this is probably the most important one for you to really study and make sure you get right. Because if the government says, we will give you max points if you do this, and this is how we're going to evaluate that, that should drive everything that you're doing. You need to put together a package that the government can look at and give you the max points based on what they've asked for. So your technical approach will be driven by what the government's looking for. Your pricing will be driven by what the government's looking for. Everything, your timing, your cost, schedule, performance, everything will be driven by what the government's asking for in those evaluation sections. So I think that's really important. And the common mistakes are, this is just, Rick's heard me say this, I don't know how many times. Read the question, answer the question. Don't get cute. And my favorite thing is when a contractor reads the question and says, oh, government, you're asking the wrong question. Here's the right question, and here's the answer to the right question. You've now completely eliminated your response from consideration, because the government's not going to change their criteria because you're smarter than them and you have given them the right answer with the right question. They're going to evaluate against the question they ask. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned there is a place for that with the source of SOT or RFI where you're not, where your contract isn't in the line. It's almost the exact opposite, right? You're not in a place when you're responding to the solicitation of suggesting what the new things are. Now they've already decided, right? That's why we always talk about, we need to get as far ahead of that solicitation as possible.
Yeah. Well, there's one caveat. Yes, but there's one caveat. When a solicitation is issued, the government has to have a question and answer period. And they'll say, if you have any questions or, find any material issues with our solicitation, and this is an interesting one. If you have any questions, you have usually like 2 weeks to submit the questions to the government. The government then usually has a week or so to respond. And if your questions drive a material change to the solicitation, they'll extend the due date so you have time to adjust whatever you're doing. The other one is, If you find something that's just materially wrong, you don't have to wait for the questions, and the question time frame is not it doesn't apply. Even up to the day before submission, if you go, oh wait, government, you asked for something that is completely conflicting, and there's a gross error in your own documentation, you can send an email to the contracting officer or call them or whatever. Better to do it by email, honestly, to highlight any issue at that level at any time. But your opportunity to influence it is limited. But once the government comes back out and answers the questions or updates the solicitation with an amendment, that's locked in. Answer the question, read it, answer it, and you will be evaluated against that. So one of my current things that I'm trying to focus on companies with is speak in plain English. Don't get cute. Don't get fancy. Don't get, verbose. Your opening sentence or paragraph should be as plain speak as you can make it. And it's, I always say 8th grade English and small sentences. And as you do that, start with a very clear and concise, here's what you're going to read. And then, give them all the information. So if somebody's reading through your paragraph going, I don't quite know what it is you're trying to tell me, you've missed an opportunity. So this is the old, very simple first opening paragraph sentence should say, we meet or exceed all of your requirements by offering, XYZ. Let me tell you all the rest of that. And technically, at that point, if an evaluator says, oh, okay, well, I believe you, I don't need to read any further, you get full points, then that's your touchdown. So I think that, Deshauna, I don't know if I've covered everything you're looking at there, but what other questions do you have? I kind of wandered across the spectrum of your question there. Do you have any specific questions there?
You said thank you and yes. And I will say we don't have to go into it now, but if anyone goes back to the pre-recorded session I had with Colonel Orndorff, is in the training section under proposals. He does go into a little bit of the structure, at least insofar as executive summary. He talks, you guys may have seen that, where he's very clear on how sometimes your solicitation or your proposal is going to be evaluated by different teams or different people. So don't cram everything into the executive summary and assume who's evaluating the different parts have seen that, because they might not even see the executive summary. So I know you talk about each part standing on its own. So I did want to just bring that up and just tell people, hey, there is you go in depth in another training on that.
Yeah. And on that, it's okay to repeat a key point. And if it's a key point and a strength, repeat it often. Make sure the government doesn't miss it.
Yeah. Andy's up next, I think.
Okay. So you have a quick question about how task orders work on IDIQs.
If you don't mind, I'm just so the quick question is, so for just quick context, I'm on my company's on is subcontracting currently for a prime contractor on what is actually a SIBR. But they have an IDIQ that's going to be utilizing the same technology. Their intention is to pull us over onto that IDIQ, according to them. But the conversation, this was like, we were supposed to be having this conversation almost 6 months ago. And what I keep getting back is, well, we haven't worked out the next task order as far as funding. So I'm trying to understand is like, when you have an IDIQ, I think their ceiling is like 50 million on this one. That doesn't mean there's necessarily funding for the entire IDIQ. And does that go for like other like phase 3 SIBRs and contracts where like you see these contracts out there? There's some of them, I've seen ones that have $1 billion ceiling, but that doesn't actually necessarily meet. Is that just like a green light for them to use this vehicle to get funding? Or like, why is there what is this in between where it's like, okay, we have the vehicle, we've won the contract award, but we actually have to go get the funding paced throughout the contract, I guess, period. So I'm just trying to understand how that works. So when I have a conversation with the customer, I understand that better.
Well, you just mixed a whole bunch of different elements together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you take the entire SIBR piece and just set it aside, because it's not really relevant to your question. Not really. A multiple award, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, up to a ceiling amount. really what it is, it's just a framework of a contract. Almost think of it as, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but it's a pre-negotiated framework that has all the terms and conditions and the prices think of it as a catalog. And you can say, okay, like, here's a catalog. It's got everything's already negotiated, all the terms and conditions, delivery details, everything else. But until you come to me with your credit card or, some money and say, I want, item 2 and 3 and 4 off of page 5, give me 7 of those. And then you can, swipe your card and you get those items. So the structure is in place as that IDIQ. And the way the government does it, because they have to have, like boundaries and limits and, approval levels for things. They say, look, here is a pre-negotiated contract that you can place orders against as many as you want, as often as you want, until the total number of orders reaches $50 million. So if somebody says, I have a $50 million IDIQ, the contract is probably worth about $20,000 for sure, because they have a minimum order on IDIQs, which will ultimately be, I see $20,000 or maybe $100,000, quite a bit for, something like this. The government only guarantees that company that they will order up to that minimum order. So like 20,000. After that, I know companies who have IDIQs that have been sitting out there for years and they don't have any orders against them at all. The government has not, because what an IDIQ does, from a government perspective, if we talked about all the market research and all the time frame for an acquisition, basically, if you have an IDIQ on the table, you shrink your time frame because you don't have to do the market research. You don't have to do the pre-solicitation. You don't have to do the, contract evaluation. You don't have to do the vetting of the vendors. You don't have to do, all that. It's already done. So now you have this contract vehicle on the table. It really just allows the government to shortcut, streamline, and more efficient. Sometimes you have multiple awards where you have multiple contractors on it, but they've already been vetted and the prices have already been negotiated and the terms have already been negotiated. So they may compete amongst 2 contractors on a multiple award to say, hey, you both are technically, we know your technical is good, your past performance is good. In this case, just tell us what your labor mix is going to be, and whoever has the lowest price on that will win this task order. So in this case, they've got an IDIQ, and the government has to must still go get funding for the requirement. The IDIQ is just a vehicle for them to, contract vehicle. Does that answer your question? I think I'm trying to go in circles there, Andy.
No, it does. It does. And the thing that's, I guess, confusing to me is that, so the confusion with the SIBR thing was just that we are on a SIBR with them and that's totally separate. And I understand it's separate, but the technology that we're building for them is basically, they're saying the IDIQ is for like a Navy, it's a Navy contract, right? And we're doing like a SIBR is basically slush money from the Army that they happen to get to work on this on the side. They're interested in it. And they said, if you deliver over here, there's very good chance we're going to also give you an RFP for our IDIQ. But like right now they're saying, we're looking at Lockheed to potentially fund our next task order. And I'm like, okay, so Lockheed's a contractor, you're a contractor. He's like, how is that? Like, I don't really understand how that's working.
Yeah. I do not know.
Or maybe they're like a partner on the next task order. I don't really understand how that works. And again,
it might be confusing language. They might be talking about a bunch of different things too.
Yeah, you're mixing an awful lot. There are some, you're mixing an awful lot. But here's the bottom line. The government is the one who has a requirement. Appropriated funds come through the government. And even if they give it to Lockheed and they allow Lockheed to use an existing, contracts that, for their purposes, which is unusual. It's not unheard of, but it's unusual. The government is the one who will make decisions about how the money will be spent. And the key on this one is, and I see this a lot right now. I have a couple of clients that they're deciding what the government's requirement is without telling the government. And then they're thinking that the government's going to come up with money because they've got a great idea. And so I keep going back. Look, if you're not sitting down and talking to the government to understand what it is that they do require, not what you think they should require, but what they actually require, because the government then has a very complex process of securing the funding. And when Rick was a program manager, even if he wanted something and everybody wanted something, part of his job, and a big part of his job, was to go and get the money to actually pay for it and to make sure that was available. And what I hear a lot of people doing, like here's Contractor X, they say, hey, we've got this great idea. We're going to work with this major defense contractor, and we're just trying to figure out what contract we're going to, vehicle we're going to use. My first comment is, who's talking to the government? What is the government telling you about what contract vehicle they want to use? It's not up to the contractor. This IDIQ, the government may say, we're not going to use that IDIQ. We're going to use this contract vehicle or this method over here. So the company you're supporting is probably trying to, second guess, what's the best way for the government. They may even have some recommendations to the government, like, we think this is the best way for you to do this. But what's missing here is the government coming to the table with money. So it doesn't matter if they think it's this one or this one. The government will vote and tell everybody in the scheme, here's how we're going to do this. So I think the way I would look at it is the company should be saying, we are planning or we are strategizing that this is the way we want to go, but we won't know until the government tells us.
Gotcha.
So Andy, I think what's missing here is the actual vote that matters from the government.
Okay. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And,
All right.
and I just wanted to just double down on that. I feel like almost the contract vehicle is for the government agency in a lot of ways, just to make things a lot faster. And a lot of the companies I work with, same problems that Colonel Mordorf's talked about. They win a IDIQ or GWAC, or they get on GSA and they think, hey, everything's going to start falling into our lap. It's not. What I tell them is, look, it's good to have a lot of different options for the government. Like the office I worked in for a long time, we never used GSA. So it didn't matter if someone came to me with GSA schedule or not. But I used the shit out of NASA soup and things like that, right? So, which by the way, isn't even owned by the Air Force. So I don't know if this complicates things or not, but that NASA soup, have hundreds of companies on it and $1 billion ceiling or whatever it was. The only way that I could use it is with their permission, and I would have to send them the $10 million or whatever.
Yeah.
I'd have to find it and put it on there. And that's not easy and it's not fast.
And there's an overhead for that. So I used to have to approve those MIPRs, military interdepartmental purchase requests. Actually, NASA gets a percentage, for their contract shop to do that. So if we could do it internally, we would not allow that money to transfer. And, again, the government is the one who's making a decision about how what contracts are going to be used and when and how much and what the requirement is. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. If you really want to influence that, get a meeting with the government and say, what are you thinking? What's going on? What's the plan? You can do your market research too. And this is, part of business development, but generate that conversation, get the conversation going, cut out the middleman, go straight to the, government entity if you can and say, let's talk about what's really going on here.
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
James is up next here. He says, well, you can say it if you want, but he had a proposal to a solicitation. It's now showing inactive. Contracting officer states the start of implementation is 2.3.25.
Maybe February 3rd, 2025.
Okay. February 3rd, 2025. Okay. No one a decision has been made.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because the solicitation number is not the same as a contract award number. So you can be, looking at a place like USA Spending to see the contract awards are all posted on USA Spending. You have to go to the contracting officer and ask them, can you give us a status of this, evaluation? And if they say it's been awarded, then you must ask for a debrief. There's many situations where, and I'm trying to decide if there's any situations where if you ask for a debrief, they can just say, no, we're not going to tell you anything. But it's a fundamental. If the government has awarded this and they owe you a debrief, and that debrief will be, can be pretty simple, but it'll say who won and how much. And then if there were any factors that, they evaluated on yours that you need to know about, the government owes you a debrief if it's already been awarded. Now, I've been involved in both as a government person and as a consultant and a support and a contractor, where the government said, hey, we're going to transition this on February 2nd or 3rd, and we just aren't ready. The government is not done with the evaluation. It gets stuck in some legal do loop or review do loop, and the contract is going to end. So what's happening today, if that's true, that's Monday. What's happening today is the government has already awarded, or they are talking to the person who's currently doing the contract and asking them if they can extend for a period of time, or they're telling the user that you are going to have a period of time where there will be no support until we can, finalize this acquisition process. So there's a couple of variables there that are in place. So each one of these would have their different things. If they've already awarded, then you need to contact the contracting officer and say, please tell us who the award is, give us a debrief, and the FAR prescribes what information should be in that debrief. If they've extended, they should be asking you for an extension on the validity period of your proposal if it's only good through like today. And if they're not asking, then maybe they're still evaluating, and maybe it's stuck in legal review, maybe it's just on somebody's desk and they're just, I don't know. Sometimes they just don't get it done, even if they're supposed to. And if there's an extension of the existing contract, the contract officer should be able to tell you that as well, because it would change the perspective, the projected start date, which companies, that impacts you quite a bit. So, James, I don't know what else to tell you about that one. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, you are. I just wanted to know because I know so we were supposed to submit the proposal on the 29th of January, which is a couple of days ago. They said that the start of the contract is supposed to be February the 3rd. So I know there was a pretty tight window for them to actually get the proposals and review them. So
the tight window.
Yeah. And so we're just trying to figure out, because I'm on pins and needles. I want to make sure that at least if it's already been awarded, I want to know who received it. And then thank you for the information about debrief, because if we don't hear anything by today, by Monday, I should be requesting a debrief.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And, the bottom line is, I mean, contracting officers hate this, but call them every 5 minutes. Go knock on their door if you're close to them. Do not let them blow you off on this, because if you're the apparent, if you win and you don't know at this point and you're supposed to start Monday, we got some problems.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yes,
James,
sir.
did they confirm that they received your proposal?
They did. Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yeah, they did. The only caveat is we were supposed to send in past performances, and I didn't know that they were supposed to be sent in on the 13th of January. So I sent them in with my actual performance, but she didn't say anything about, that was an issue. But she did confirm. She confirmed it.
Yeah, just so you know, if the government decides, if they were due on the 13th and you didn't provide them on the 13th, they have a lot of latitude there to toss out your offer as non-responsive.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Colonel.
Yeah. Good luck with that one, James. Or wait, yeah, James.
That's James.
Okay, who's next?
Jeff is next.
Jeff is next.
Jeff, do you want to just go ahead and ask?
Yeah, so I was just curious. So my focus is going to be on companies that are not currently selling to the government. And I've heard that you really need to be a skilled proposal writer, but it sounds like based on what you're saying, that if you just read it and answer it and be direct, you should be okay. But am I right? Am I wrong? I'm
going to say yes and yes. So here's the bottom line. Just because you really provide an outstanding, written, a well-written response doesn't mean that you're technically superior or that your price is, going to win, or the other factors, past performance, whatever. What you want to do is your technical, your narrative, you want to write it in such a way that the government says, yes, full points, next item. Yes, full points, next item. But the content matters. So the first one is, yes, if you write it well, you'll get full points. if your content supports full points. So I think that those two things have to go hand in hand, Jeff. But I don't think you need to be a professional proposal writer, because at the end of the day, I'll say it again, read the question, answer the question, put yourself in the shoes of the person who's reading this and go, am I receiving information that will help me make the decision to say yes? And if it's not well organized, that's no. If it's unclear, that's a no. If it's yeah, if you just like really do a good job of writing, that's a huge part of the battle. The other part of the battle is content and, price and, are you responsive in all the other areas? So it's a two-part question. Fair enough?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Of course.
So, okay, so this is because I don't think you need a professional proposal writer either. I do think you need to understand how to write a proposal in like some of the things that Colonel Orndorff's talking about. But beyond just the writing part, I think you have to understand what you're signing up for. And that's where, like, when he gave a really in-depth training about a month ago on reading the FAR clauses. Sometimes those clauses like are just a number, right? And so if you've never written a proposal before and you're seeing it for the first time, you might be so focused on writing to try to win it that you may ignore something that would maybe jump out to somebody that has done this before or like had taken the time. So I think I would just throw in there, you need to understand what is really being asked of you and paying attention to some of those FAR clauses. So I would offer understanding the solicitation is another piece of kind of responding to it. Okay. Who else? I think that's it in the chat. Anyone else have any questions for the Colonel before we end it? No? Going once? Going twice? All right. Okay, so look, this was a great session. Thanks, Colonel, for taking your time out with everybody here today. He'll be back. He's a returning guest. So I will say, too, just as far as, let's go just one step further with proposals, right? This is something I use all the time. Like, nobody on this call is going to be the expert at everything in government contracting, no matter how long you spend on it. There are different areas, right? There are people that have spent like 20 years in one area and understand it really well. And then there's other people there's so much that goes into it. And so just to give you an example of how we can use Colonel Orndorff, right? Aside from these calls, his specialty really revolves around, if you have a client that has a big contract coming up and, those solicitations we were talking about, they could be 100 pages long. Like, I'll tell you, like even though I've been involved with this for a long time, I just go to Colonel Orndorff with that. Like if they want to understand, not have it written for them, but just understand what do we need to pay attention to? What's the contracting officer really looking for? That could be really hard to figure out. Like I could tell you, me and Colonel Orndorff can read a solicitation, the same one, and I'm going to have a different idea about what's going on there. And I'm mainly focused on, I want to solve the problem that the government has, but the way that's written, the way it's going to be evaluated, that could be a little bit complex. And so if you have something that is, at a higher value level for a client, they may want a Colonel Orndorff to review not only the solicitation, but their proposal after it's written and kind of red team it for them. This is something that, it's not for kind of the smaller contracts really, but once you start getting up there, you really want to make sure you put a lot of effort into these proposals. These proposals are not written by ChatGPT. They might use it for a little bit, but I mean, there's a ton of effort that goes into it. Sometimes months are taken to write these proposals. And, Steven's nodding his head down there. So just know that we have a resource. Okay. And, that's something that you can, just let me know, shoot me a note and we'll get you with Colonel Orndorff if you have a client that needs something like that. For me, it happens probably every month or two where there's a potential project that comes up. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And then Steven, we're going to be on at 3. So we'll end this call and then me, you and Colonel will come back on at 3.
So, Rick, let me just do one final thing. Look, I've been reading the FAR for maybe almost 30 years. The more I learn, the more I understand how much I don't know. It is complicated. And, the key is every time you're faced with a problem, you just take the time and you dig in. I might go and read all of FAR 12 for solving one problem, and then I'll turn around and have a new problem and read it a completely different way. But, it's just like nobody's ever finished with the journey and, at the pinnacle. All my colleagues and all the people who taught me, along the way, I'll go back and, we all agree the same thing. The more you do this, the more you realize that it's complicated and each problem is hard. So it's okay. Jeff, every proposal you write is going to be a different challenge, and it's okay. But I would just say, just you get your routine of digging in and doing the homework and, figuring out how to solve these problems and getting some good frameworks for your approach and stay in it. The last thing I'll say, and I know we're trying to wrap this up, if you're focused on contracting, there's an organization called National Contract Management Association. I've been part of NCMA for decades. And they've got some really good certifications and training courses that go very detailed into the contracting stuff. So it's a great resource, and they've got some really good magazines that have good articles, and they have an annual conference. I'm trying to get Rick to go to those conferences because a lot of the stuff that he's teaching is the kind of stuff that people there are really looking at. It's National Contract Management Association, ncmahq.org. If you want to look at that one a little bit closer. It's a great resource, and it's also a place, if you go to these national, every year they do a worldwide, it's a great place to, network with some contracting professionals. I mean, I know everybody's like, who wants to do that? But there are some interesting opportunities and some good people in that arena. So that's it, Rick. Sorry, final plug.
It's all good. All right, guys. See you next week. Cheers.